do you hope to achieve? And if not, why not?
I'm Marjorie Egan, and then we'll take a soothing break from politics for Live Music Friday. This week, it's a full wind quintet with Castle of Our Skins, a Black Boston arts institution dedicated to celebrating Black artistry through music. That's all ahead. First hour, Boston Public Radio, 89.
Live from NPR News, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to the White House today. They are supposed to sign a preliminary agreement on sharing Ukrainian critical minerals with the United States. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports Trump insists this is a major step toward reaching a peace deal with Russia.
President Trump says the agreement will provide the U.S. access to minerals that are essential for aviation and defense technology. Trump also sees it as a chance for the U.S. to recoup some of the billions of dollars that U.S. taxpayers have spent helping Ukraine defend itself against the Russian invasion. Trump also said he believes Russian President Vladimir Putin would respect the terms of any deal. Franco Ordonez, NPR News.
Aid programs for millions of people are collapsing worldwide. This comes after the U.S. Agency for International Development and the State Department announced this week the termination of contracts worth nearly $60 billion. NPR's Gabriela Emanuel has more.
Michaela Hilo is a program manager at the Ethiopian nonprofit Organization for Social Services, Health and Development. He learned U.S. funding for his work with HIV-positive children was terminated.
This is just a disaster.
The termination means his program is laying off all 135 workers, and the 1,600 children and adolescents they work with are without their HIV medication. He fears that without medicine to keep the virus in check, the kids will fall ill.
We don't even want to open our eyes to see the disaster that's coming.
His program is one of roughly 10,000 grants and contracts that were terminated. Others include clean water for refugee camps and food aid for malnourished children. Gabriela Emanuel, NPR News.
Egypt says talks to further the ceasefire agreement in Gaza between Israel and Hamas have opened in Cairo. That's as the current phase of the deal is set to expire this weekend. NPR's Kath Lonsdorf has more from Tel Aviv.
Egypt says that, quote, intensive discussions on the next stage of the ceasefire deal are underway. Israel confirmed it has sent a delegation to Cairo. Qatari officials are also present, mediating for Hamas, which says it remains committed to the deal. President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is also expected in the region soon. The first phase of the ceasefire deal, which has lasted almost 6 weeks, ends this weekend, although Israel has expressed interest in extending it while details of the next phase continue to be hammered out. Phase 2 would see more hostages and Palestinian detainees released, as well as further withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. More humanitarian aid would also be allowed into Gaza, which has been critical in recent weeks. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
On Wall Street, stocks are higher. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 282 points at 43,521. You're listening to NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The federal government's largest form of rental aid for low-income families, known as Section 8 assistance, could leave hundreds of thousands of households without access in the wake of a proposed budget shortfall. Bloomberg reporting that the Housing Choice Voucher Program is administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, and provides rental assistance for about 2.3 million qualified households per year. HUD Secretary Scott Turner launched a DOGE task force earlier this month to review how HUD is spending American taxpayer dollars and says his team have already identified over $260 million in savings, and they have a lot more to accomplish, he says. We learned this week that Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has a commanding lead over her mayoral opponent, Josh Kraft. A poll by Emerson College shows Mayor Wu with a 43% to 29% lead over Kraft. But now we're seeing that Boston Police Patrolmen's Association has officially thrown its support behind Mayor Wu for a second term. According to the Patrolmen's Association, it's the first time the city's largest police union has supported a Boston mayor for re-election in more than 30 years. In sports, the Celtics host the Cavs at the Garden tonight. Exhibition baseball, Red Sox play the Phillies this afternoon in Florida. And in the forecast, sunny, mild today, high in the 40s. We could see some wind gusts up about 30 miles an hour. Clouds, maybe some light rain overnight tonight, low in the 30s. Sun clouds and maybe a shower or two tomorrow, but temperatures in the low 50s. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Cigna Healthcare, a health benefits provider that advocates for better health through every stage of life. Learn more at Cigna.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio live at the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be joined by Economic Development Secretary here of Massachusetts, Yvonne Howe, at 1 o'clock. As the Attorney General with Andrea Campbell will join us next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And of course, next Wednesday is when the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, will appear down in Congress to be asked about our immigration policies here in the Commonwealth, or here in the city of Boston, I should say.
And by the way, we're going to dip into that live, so you'll get to hear what Mayor Wu has to say and what some of the bloviating Congress people have to say about what's happening here in Boston. And by the way, we're only about 25 minutes away from some stunningly beautiful music from this woodwind quintet that we heard rehearsing this morning. It's really, really beautiful. So across the country today,
excuse me. I said the Economic Secretary was joining at 1. She's joining at noon. Sorry about that. Just want to correct myself, Jim.
I'm glad you did.
First mistake of the day.
It's stunning. But it actually took about 31 seconds.
So many minutes to go. I have a lot of opportunities.
Exactly. Okay. As I was saying, across the country today, a grassroots group called the People's Union USA is leading a national boycott of major corporations. Target, Amazon, Walmart, McDonald's, Starbucks, actually everything kind of thing. The man behind this protest, this guy John Schwartz, says it's not directly about Trump or Elon Musk, but more about confronting, quote, the system as a whole, giving control back to consumers as opposed to banks and major corporations. Our number is 877-301-8970 to call or text. The premise is simple, and we want to know, are you going to be taking part yourself, or are you more skeptical about what a day of not buying from Target is actually going to do in the long run? You were just going to stock up yesterday or tomorrow morning and buy everything you didn't buy today. The number is 877-301-8970. I was going to ask Marjorie, which I will, is she going to participate? We couldn't even figure out what day it was at the beginning of the discussion this morning. Are you participating? By the way, you buy necessities like food and gas and that sort of thing,
and if you buy,
but nothing else.
And if you have to buy some stuff, you're supposed to go to local businesses to buy it. You know, I mean, this is not much of an ask, really, for 24 hours not to go to Target or Walmart or Amazon. It's not asking a big thing like actually quitting Amazon or giving up your Prime membership, which apparently a lot of Americans have done. I mean, I'm a guilty person, so I'm not gonna do any of these things today. I'm not sure it's gonna matter that much, but we got to start doing something, it would seem to me, because we hear these terrible stories from all these poor federal workers who can't pay their rent and don't know what they're going to do, and how, usually...
Well, no, it's going to help them, actually. It's not going to be able to help them pay their rent.
It's not going to help them pay their rent, but it's doing something, I suppose, even though they say it's not about Trump, but something in solidarity for the unrest and unease lots of Americans feel at this particular moment.
I think I agree with you. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not even sure exactly what the purpose of this thing is. But in light of how weak we have shown ourselves to be as a people over the last couple of months, it seems to me that if we can do anything about anything to show that we have some power, it's a plus. So I'm going to do my best, and we want to know if you guys are too. The number is 877-301-8970. And if it turns out, a lot of people did this, it's not going to affect these companies. Obviously, as I say, most people are just going to postpone spending or did it last night, that sort of thing. But it may give the American people a sense that you can do more than just tweet your concerns about what's happening to the country.
As we mentioned, they talk about going after Target, Amazon, Walmart, people that have backed off their DEI programs that they used to be supposedly so passionate about. But here's this little statement from the People's Union USA, the people that are behind this whole deal. And they talk about the overall picture of income inequality just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you have people like at the top, billions and billions and billions of dollars, and people like Henry Santoro was just talking about in the news who are possibly going to lose Section 8 housing. I mean, people can't afford housing in Massachusetts. Even if you get a lot of money, you can't practically afford housing in Massachusetts. So talking about this whole system, and this is what they said. It's to expose supply-side corruption and the exploitation of ordinary people. For decades, corporations, politicians, and industries have worked to rig the system against the American people, which a lot of people would agree with. Building an economy designed to exploit workers, suppress wages, keep the majority of us in a constant state of struggle, stealing our financial freedom, manipulating our government, and keeping power in the hands of the wealthy elite. And that does sort of describe the state that we're in at this.
Yeah, I'm not sure it does, but I'm not quite sure what this economic blackout really does to that, except again show that the American people are not total and complete weaklings. An anonymous texter says, it's a bunch of nonsense. I'm looking at a Target parking lot right now, and it's packed. So in any case, 877. By the way, how many people here are participating in this economic blackout? Whoa, that's maybe 40%? Or that's not nothing, as the saying goes. I'm sort of surprised. Is that true, or are you just doing that because you felt guilty? Those who raised your hand. No, I guess some of you are telling the truth. It's stunning. 877-301-8970 is the number.
Have you heard of Penzeys Spices? Penzeys Spices? Okay.
Obviously, somebody has.
Okay, apparently Kamala Harris visited during the campaign, and Trump called it a terrible place, overpriced place.
Of course, because Kamala Harris went to
Amber in Worcester says she is only buying today from that outlet, Penzeys Spices. She said, fantastic small business with a conscience, that I placed a huge order. We were having this debate the other day that were we foolish to think that corporate America should be the ones leading the way, conscience-wise. Obviously, we have been proven in many cases to be.
Who was having that discussion?
Well, I think this idea...
You and me?
Yeah, we did talk
Where
about
was
this.
I?
Well, you were sitting right next to me.
You mean we're just having it? Oh, I thought you meant on air.
The idea that, when George Floyd was murdered and we all watched that horrible tragic killing on television over and over and over again, there was the idea these big companies were going to do, the right thing. They were going to protest, do the DEI thing. We were going to have police reform, so cops would get in trouble for these things. There was this idea that these corporations that are out to make money, basically, were going to do the correct thing involving some of these social problems in the United States. And it seems like we were pretty stupid to believe that, because they couldn't move back from them fast enough, could they?
Listen, I could not agree with you more. 877-301-8970. I don't remember me saying in a conversation with you or anybody else, I think that corporate America is going to lead the charge for justice and equity in this country. Having said that, here's a good one. An anonymous texter, Jim and Marjorie, yes, definitely I am boycotting today. I was going to come to the library for your show, but didn't want to buy a ticket.
Okay.
So
that's an old joke here.
It's a good joke, though. It's a really
no
good one.
No tickets necessary here. You can just show up. Here's Jeff in Andover. Pardon my language, but the one-day boycott feels masturbatory. Delaying purchases and then bragging about it on social media will do nothing. Actual protesting and long-term workers' strikes that require effort, pain, and suffering on the part of participants is the only action.
Can I respond to Jeff politely? Are you kidding? I mean, we can do nothing. So if it turns out we do something that shows ourselves that we may have a little power, then maybe we can move on to those kinds of things. Like, for example, they do in Montreal or Western Europe when they're upset with something. Let's take some calls. 877-301-8970. Where do you want to start, Marjorie?
Demetra in Maynard. Hi.
Hi, Maynard. Hi, Demetra.
Hi. Hi, long-time listener. Love you guys.
Thank you.
I am boycotting for the day, although it's not really a boycott. It's like a blackout.
It is, yeah.
And the reason I'm doing it, I don't think it's masturbatory. I think it's the first
started something here, but go ahead.
Social media yeah,
Good.
off social media way of reaching across the nation and even into Canada, and just sort of recognize that there is a resistance movement.
I'm
We're
with
out
you.
here. Hold on, bud. We're out here doing whatever we can to save our democracy.
Demetra, when you
So,
said hold
I
on,
think it's
bud,
really
was I
important-
Bud or was that your dog?
No, that's my dog.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. Go ahead, Demetra.
Yeah, no, not
That's
you.
fine.
Anyway,
I was sorta
so
kidding,
I
bud.
think it's really important. I think it's a way of building solidarity, and this is just the first day. And, you know, to the guy who thinks we should just be going out in the street and getting hurt, yeah, we're going to go out in the street, and we are going to get hurt. We're going to put our bodies on the line. But right now, this is just a way of sort of building power.
Demetra, that was beautiful. And you said what I was trying to say far better than I. Thank you for doing it. You know what I just thought of? I have an original print. Did you know this in my house? Of the lone Chinese dissident standing in front of that
You do?
tank. Yeah, I really searched long and hard and found the photographer, I think in Hawaii, I'm not sure, and bought a print at Tiananmen Square. I mean,
Wow.
think of that at one extreme.
One person in front of like 4 or 5 tanks.
Versus
right in front of them.
Versus, well, there's this one tank. It's one of the most powerful photographs ever. But it is, Demetra said it perfectly. It's an opportunity to show that we actually believe in something and have a little bit of strength, and maybe we move on from
Listen
there.
to this, Kim and Norton. I'm participating. I made the mistake of making a hair appointment for today, but I prepaid on Wednesday, and the hairdresser said all of her customers prepaid. I'm shocked and dismayed that you two can't inconvenience yourself for one day and are denigrating this effort while calling for action, not even giving up on Amazon.
Wait a second. Wait. I know that's well. How does prepaying and going to get your hair cut, how does that participating in the economic
Because you're
blackout?
technically not spending that money on Friday.
Okay.
You know, you have to get your hair.
Okay.
Some of us have to get our hair colored and cut, Jim. It's very
Yeah.
important. Ann in Peabody, thank you for calling.
Jamie bought a new car after he wrecked his other one. When did you buy that? You're not buying that today, are you?
Today.
Today? No, he's
Oh.
not. He bought it 2 days ago. He bought it today, yesterday, so he wouldn't have to violate the economic blackout.
Ann in Peabody, thank you for calling.
Hello, Ann.
Oh, hi. I am right now in Whole Foods parking lot at Market Street
Ann?
because I was so interested to find out if there's anybody here.
And?
And it's for a Friday, it's pretty mild. There are not a whole lot of cars here.
Really?
Well, you know, even if there were cars there, food, like necessity food, not like a rib roast or something, I guess is permitted.
You don't have
under
to
this
buy it
today.
from
But
Jeff Bezos.
no
Well, that's a good
necessities,
point, actually.
nothing. Everybody's supposed to do it the day before. But I'm part of a group in, we live in a, am I doing this? I hear this echo.
No,
Yeah,
I know.
I'm sorry.
It's great on our end. We
Sorry.
apologize
Just
profusely.
keep
Go ahead,
going.
Annie. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's not my problem.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm part of a group at a retirement home in Peabody, Mass. We're called the Mad Grannies.
Oh, I
and
love
we're
that.
we do TikToks and everything on TikTok. Do videos on TikTok to talk about all this and what we're all upset about and everything. And everybody's doing the boycott. And tomorrow we made posters this morning, and tomorrow we're going to be doing the picket at the Tesla dealership at North Shore Mall.
Wow.
So wait a
Good for
second.
you.
What are they called? The Mad Granny? What are they called?
We're called the Mad Grannies.
So are you doing a naked calendar too, or what are you doing?
Jim.
No, we decided not to. That would be too scary, and
Yeah.
we would lose our
Too
audience.
scary. Hey, that's great that you're doing that, Annie. People should check it out on YouTube, I guess. Mad Grannies out of Peabody. Thank you very much for the call.
Here's somebody else texting in from Target saying the place is packed. They ordered last night and paid for everything last night, but they went in to get it this morning and said,
I really don't. Can you explain it to me? I mean, explain to me how paying for everything last night and going and getting it, if it's a non-necessity, how that is participating
well, I
in this
presume
thing?
because what you're hoping is that these companies that were boycotted will notice that they didn't make as much money today as they usually do. So if you put your credit card in last night, that doesn't count as today. That's what I think.
Okay. So one of our colleagues checked out the Mad Grannies, their tag on Instagram. That's pretty good. Creaky and cheeky and not afraid to be squeaky. We are
love it.
grannies who are still fighting for the rights of the next generation
That's
and beyond.
great.
vote blue. That's pretty great. The Mad Grannies on Instagram. 877-301-8970. We're talking about this proposed economic blackout today and asking you whether you're participating. We'd love to hear from people who have chosen, other than just on text, who are not participating, and we'd love to hear why. Let's go to Diane. You're in Mattapoisett. Welcome. Hi, Diane.
Good morning.
And to you.
I am participating. I am buying absolutely nothing today. And I realize this is not going to make a major impact on the economy, but I'm hoping if enough people participate, it will send a message that we are watching, we're not happy, we have power, we buy things, and most of us, I think, vote. So I hope it will send that message.
I'm stunned that we're getting all these calls. This is great. The lines are full with mostly people who are like you, Diane. Thank you much for the call. We really appreciate it.
Well, we have some dissenters. What system should we have, Marjorie? Effing communism?
But that's not, okay, go ahead.
Mr. Effin Communism, I think what we should have is regulated capitalism. That's what we used to have back when you could be a father with a wife at home and 2 children, and you could afford a car, and you could afford a home, and you could afford a vacation, and maybe a 2-week vacation somewhere, when this economy used to work for the middle class, when the middle class went through the roof. And Mr. Communism, as you may know, the middle class
Mr. Effing Communism
is getting crushed because of policies that began with Ronald Reagan, and the income inequality has just gotten worse and worse and worse. So wake up, you're getting suckered.
Boy, that was actually quite beautiful.
Thank you.
Can I read this anonymous? Whoa, Donna, 1 second. Listen to that. That was incredible. Anonymous, I ran out of wine, which I need to deal with number 47. That'd be this president. And I'm in front of Total Wine, not going in, standing strong, maybe.
Okay, there's an honest.
That's pretty good.
there's an honest person. Do I go? Do I
Get
not
back
go?
to us in
How much
5
do I need
minutes
the
and
wine?
let us know.
Oh, I know what you could do instead. You go to the pasta store, but you can't do that either because you have to pay for it when it's the pasta store. So that's
No,
fine.
you pay for it last night and pretend that that's not violating the economic blackout. I mean, really.
Okay.
Go without it for 1 day. I mean...
Really, we just, well, this is a local company, so it's different.
Not only that, that was called breakfast.
That was called breakfast.
We ate
Food,
breakfast.
but it is a local company, so we're okay. That's right?
It is a local company. The Newsfeed Cafe we're talking about,
yes, Newsfeed
which
Cafe.
is a wonderful part of a catered affair. Thank you.
We're talking about the economic blackout that's taking care of...
for that, too.
That's going on today to kind of some kind of a protest here for what you see is going on around you in the United States of America. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
When you pour yourself a drink, you're probably using a glass that was cut by a machine. But in Spain, one man still cuts glasses by hand and makes top dollar while he's doing it. We meet the man making drinkware the old-fashioned way, artisanal glass, and the latest headlines. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And the Worcester Art Museum, presenting Flora in Winter, with artworks reimagined and stunning floral arrangements all throughout the museum. February 27th through March 2nd. Tickets available at the door. worcesterart.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browder. We're live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Next Wednesday, the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will join us from 1 to 2 for Ask the Attorney General. Plus, we'll bring you special coverage, live, much of it, of Mayor Wu testifying before that hearing. By the way, good news, on President Zelenskyy just appeared at the White House seconds ago, and Donald Trump did not give him the finger, which I think was a very good first step in that. And Marjorie, we're talking about this economic blackout, which is proposed for today. You only buy necessities, that sort of thing, basically to show the power of the consumers against big banks and major corporations. And we want to know if you're participating. If you are, why? And if you're not, why? 877-301-8970.
I mentioned going to the pot store before. We have some weed enthusiasts who are texting. One of them says, I'm putting off my weed purchase till Saturday, seeds and stems till then. And someone else says, if you pay for your weed in cash, you avoid that debt surcharge and do not contribute to the numbers today. I don't know if that's...
What is that?
I don't know if that's true, but that's their theory and they're sticking to it.
Do you want to give another lecture on capitalism, or you're done?
I don't, but I'm just always amazed that we still don't get it. I'm just amazed.
Well, or they do get it and they just want to aggravate us, which generally succeeds, actually.
Marianne in Hopkinton, thank you for calling.
Hi, I'm actually not participating mainly because I didn't know about it.
That's a good reason.
Too late.
Very good reason.
I actually switched back to a flip phone and I don't have Wi-Fi on my phone. I'm kind of disconnected.
Wait, can you, hey, Marianne, your connection is horrible, but we want to hear. So do that one more time if you can. I know you're not participating because you didn't know about it. And what'd you say after that?
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Is this better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I didn't know about it, but I just wanted to say that I respect all the people that are, and keep up the good fight. This has been just a horrible couple months, and I can't think of one good thing the administration has done. So,
hey, Marianne, can I give you a suggestion?
Yeah.
Since you seem to be simpatico, I don't think you're violating any rule if now that you do know about it, you participate for the rest of the 12 hours and 34 minutes. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, good. Well, that's nice. Marianne, thank you for your call. I'm sorry the connection is bad, so we got to let you go. But thank you much for giving us some time. 877-301-8970.
Okay, let us next go to Jim in Brighton. Hi, Jim.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Hi.
I can't participate fully because I have to go visit my aunt in Long Island, and I got to take the ferry, buy lunch, and all that. And that was scheduled weeks ago.
That's okay.
But I am fully supportive, though.
Well, yeah, I don't think taking a ferry and buying lunch is extravagant. I don't think you're violating anything. I consider you to be participating. Are you buying her a gift, or you're just showing up?
Well, it's scheduled, but I'm just showing up.
Well, I think just showing up is fine. You're in compliance, Jim. Thank you very much for the call. An anonymous texter says, I'm down to one roll of toilet paper at my house. I am a failure. It's economic boycott Friday. Well, I mean, you got to do what you got to do there.
I'm getting a lot of text messages about Penzeys spices, Jim. And it looks really good.
All those people over here have been there.
Yeah, look at their website.
Or something.
They have all these great that you get on the email list, and they have free shipping. And
Kamala Harris was there.
Vietnamese cinnamon that they use in cinnamon rolls and all this stuff.
It's not really what our topic is.
Well, just letting people know it's like a big deal.
Aiden, our colleague, actually, this is sort of almost makes me weep how beautifully done this is. Going out to dinner with friends tonight in solidarity with Blackout Friday. I will not be picking up the tab. That is really moving. Really moving.
That's good.
I think I speak for everyone here. Let's go to Kim in Arlington. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome, Kim. Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hi,
Love
guys.
your show.
Thanks.
But wanted to tell you, sorry, I'm getting some feedback.
I know. We have a problem.
We hear you fine, though. If you can endure, we'd appreciate it. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
I am participating today, but more than that, I wanted to bring up the issue of so many people I know are feeling absolutely helpless with what's going on. Participating in something like this may or may not make a big difference in our current situation. But if people want to stop feeling helpless, there are all sorts of small things that people can do, such as participating today. The other thing that I say to people is bring a box of cereal to a food bank once a month. These small things will add up, and they really give you a sense of power in a time when we're feeling pretty hopeless and pretty helpless.
That was a beautiful call. Kim. That was a beautiful call. Thanks for making it. Sorry about the feedback.
We have a lot of people who say they've given up Amazon. They've given up Amazon Prime. They haven't gone to Target in ages.
Impressive.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
You've given up Amazon, I know, haven't you?
No, I
Not
haven't,
yet, no.
and I should. I'm really bad. I really should. I'm embarrassed. Have you?
You know
given,
what I did? No,
have you
I've
given up?
not given up Amazon, but
We're terrible.
I did smash the windshield on my Tesla last night in solidarity. It's very hard to drive, but I feel that I am participating in the movement by can I say something? Because I take a huge amount of crap, I think rightly, for owning a Tesla, and my pathetic excuse is I bought it before this sickness. And I would like to say, Jamie said you could just try crashing your Tesla into my new car.
Yeah.
Jamie totaled his car the other. Forget what I was going to say. It's ridiculous. Let's go to Melissa in Stowe. You are next on Boston Public Radio. Hi, Melissa. Thanks for calling.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly. Thank you.
Great. I wanted to say, first of all, Jim, part of the reason people are paying early is, and today the other day I went to the bank and got cash out for this purpose instead of using a credit card, is that they want to disengage from the financial systems, the credit cards, and the big banks. I use a local bank, so this is one way of protesting, is by changing the way we pay for things.
By the way, that is great, and I'm embarrassed I didn't think of that. I'm so glad you pointed that out. Keep going, Melissa.
Given that bank regulation is on the table right now, I think that's really important. The other part of it is that we need to reconsider our choices on a daily basis. So, for instance, my local organic farm is open today for 4 hours. It's not convenient for everybody, I get that. But you can go and get fresh spinach that they grew in their high tunnel. More and more local producers are doing this. They're figuring out in New England how to produce food through all the seasons. And we need to take advantage of that. We need to support that, because when things blow up, we're going to need these local systems, our local merchants, the shopkeepers, the farmers. This is what we need to be doing, not just today, but on a daily basis. So if one day makes people rethink these choices, that's important.
Melissa, that was also great. Thanks for the call. I've told this story before. A friend of Marjorie and mine runs Farm Aid, the Willie Nelson organization. And on the board is Mellencamp and Dave Matthews and Neil Young. And Neil Young gave this expletive-laden speech before he performed a couple of years ago, saying what Melissa said. There's no excuse for not going to small family farms. All of us live within a reasonable radius and can buy a lot of stuff from them that we choose not to, rather than buying it at Amazon or at, Amazon, same thing, Whole Foods. And it was pretty persuasive. And if you look at a map, Neil Young was exactly
Well, they have
right.
those farm shares too. You can get
that's true.
certain things from the farm. I know a lot of people that do that, which is pretty neat. Andrea from New Hampshire says she's donating money today to the ACLU to help fight instead of buying anything else. At Fight Fascism. That's
By the way, that's a great addition to this. I don't know if it's part of the whatever it's called, economic blackout thing, but the money you save, unless you're just postponing your shopping till tomorrow, give it to some body or set of bodies that are going to do something that you value. That's a wonderful idea. Let's squeeze one more in, Marjorie. Donna in Marlborough.
Hi, Donna.
Thanks. Hi.
Hi. I feel like can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm in my car.
Okay.
I pulled over earlier.
That's fine.
So everybody said a lot of my sentiments on this, but I would just say that we're not powerless. This is a small step, and the power of the purse is great. I think I've been getting together with a group of friends, and we've been brainstorming things we can do locally, and because sometimes in Massachusetts, it feels like we have representatives doing a lot of the right things.
Great point.
But anyway, thank you for putting me on the air. I'm a big fan,
You're
and
very nice.
keep it up.
Thanks. That's so nice of you.
You know, just a quick look at the text before we leave. A lot of people are pointing out that the ongoing boycott of Target, which started when they got rid of their Pride stuff, remember the LGBTQ stuff,
yeah.
has apparently hurt their stock prices.
Is that true?
Well, several texters have mentioned that, and a lot of texters have said, what callers have said, that this is only the first step. And I do think, I do think that's true. I mean, I think it's going to be a problem if you give massive tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires and you slash Medicaid, which pays for people in nursing homes and pays for children and pays for mass health here in Massachusetts. I think that's going to be a problem. And it's Henry Santor. I mean, you know, it's just the wrong picture. You know, the richest guy on earth screwing the poorest people in the United States.
But here's one last dilemma before we break. Stephen texts this. Jim, I'm online at Bacon of the Month Club. It has a huge sale today. That's what Marjorie gives me for my birthday every year. But I will sit here sweating in solidarity with you and do my best not to click. And I commend you, Stephen, for your bravery in the face of something really difficult.
It's tough. Those decisions are tough. Like the guy outside the liquor store. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, we're moving on because we're going to hear some fantastic music in just a couple of minutes for our weekly Live Music Friday segment. Care of the Black Arts Initiative, Castle of Our Skins and Celebrity Series of Boston, a woodwind quintet. Where do you hear this? This is Boston Public Radio 89.7 live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, we remember Roberta Flack, who was one of the most important singers of the 70s and beyond. She died earlier this week at age 88. From there, the 007 franchise is under new management. What will the fate of James Bond be now that Amazon has creative control? And the notorious Fyre Festival that went up in flames is back with a sequel. What could possibly go wrong? That and more today at 2 on our Arts and Culture Week in Review on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Porter Square, offering private cooking events for your next team building activity, family reunion, birthday party, or night out. You can learn more at cambridgeculinary.com. And Elephant Energy, specializing in all-electric heat pumps from Mitsubishi Electric. Elephant Energy helps homeowners looking to reduce their carbon footprint. Learn more at elephantenergy.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Next Wednesday at the library, Attorney General Andrea Campbell will join us live from 1 to 2 to take your questions. So it's time for Live Music Friday, care of the Black Arts Collective, Castle of Our Skins. Tomorrow, in collaboration with Celebrity Series Boston, Castle of Our Skins will host a special free concert at Bethel AME Church in JP. The show is I Said What I Said, a showcase of Black excellence and a chance for audiences to reflect on their own agency, power, and creative strength. You go to celebrityseries.org for information. In a moment, we'll hear from Ashley Gordon, co-founder and artistic director with Castle of Our Skins, Robin Baker, Celebrity Series Associate Director of Community Engagement, and joining all the way from Louisiana, Brian Neighbors. He's composed a brand new piece titled Sketches from the Movement that debuts at the show. For now, though, here's the Castle of Our Skins Wind Quintet performing an excerpt of composer Damian Jeter's I Said What I Said. Welcome. Just beautiful. Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Castle of Our Skins. We're going to hear all about them in just a second. Ashley, you can tell us the numbers of the quintet.
Sure, yes. We have Deshaun Gordon King on flute. Alessandro, yes, give it up. Alessandro Cherafici on oboe. Rachel Juzak on bassoon. Virginia Morales on French horn, and Yasmin Valenzuela Blanchard on clarinet.
Beautiful.
Okay,
Just great.
So tell us about Castle of Our Skins. How did this come about? You're the co-founder. What is this group?
Sure. Castle of Our Skins is a concert and education series all around Black history, Black culture, Black arts. This is our 12th season, our 7th, collaborating with the Celebrity Series of Boston. And we do everything that fosters cultural curiosity around Black culture, whether that's on stage or off. So we do things like this, which are concerts, right? And promoting the music of Black composers, and often pairing that, as our name comes from a poem by Nikki Giovanni, with spoken word. So this concert tomorrow includes our creative in residence, who is a poet all the way from Pennsylvania, and engaging with both music and poetry, which, like West African griots, using the tools that we have available to us to showcase history and keep it top of our mind.
We'll get to the nervous guy whose piece is being played in just a second. Robin, I'd be nervous. I don't know, but we'll find out in a minute. Well, how did this collaboration come about?
Solos Together is a commissioning project that started in 2020, and we wanted to highlight new works by diverse composers, and they were selected by the artists in neighborhood arts. And since Castle of Our Skins is on our roster, they've actually had the pleasure of 2 solos commissions with us. And the pieces highlight the musicians as soloists and as a finale in a group together.
So Brian, tell us about sketches from the movement and how nervous you are. Go ahead. In either order.
Sure. At this point, I'm not too nervous.
Why? Because there's nothing you can do, right? It's
I mean,
done.
at that point, there's nothing you can do. And plus, I just trust the artistry, you know, the musicians. They give so much to, bring what we do to life as composers. But I'll tell you a little bit about the piece. With this commission being so special as it is, each composer who's been a part of it has, gotten a chance to really give something of value. And I wanted to, of course, with all of my work, write something that would be long-lasting, that would really stick not only in our field but go beyond it. So I reached back deep down into my Birmingham, Alabama roots. That's where I'm originally from. And now more than ever, what my parents have gone through as children of the civil rights movement, what my grandparents and my family, who's all from Alabama, very steeped in that culture. I grew up Birmingham City Schools, all of it. I had no choice but to feel the weight of that history. And so as I became an artist and a composer, it meant the world to me to have people, I could partner with who would uplift what the history is and what it means for us as a people collectively going forward. And so with each soloist sort of being highlighted within the group itself, all the movements pick a different freedom song from the movement, whether it be This Little Light of Mine or anything. We have so many from that time period. And so my father and my mother, they have had so many stories of real accounts where they've seen things happen, places they couldn't go, crazy things. Like, I'll tell you really quickly, my mother, she mentioned to me when she was just a child going into a store on a Saturday, had to go through the back door, things like that. To go to the bathroom, you had to pay 10 cents. And so as a community, we were so tight-knit then, one person would hold the door open while the other person handled the business to keep from having to keep putting coins in whatever contraption they had to keep people from just using stuff like that. So,
are your parents alive?
They are.
Have they heard your piece?
They have not yet.
Oh my goodness.
But I've written a lot of things that speak to, what they went through, obviously. And so they've been there for a lot of the premieres, and it's meant a lot. It's full circle because a lot of them get to, a lot of my family and friends too, get to come into spaces that they may have not been, welcomed before as a result of, me expanding in my career and being able to go and do what I do. So it's a blessing, full circle.
Talk about doing what you do. I was looking at your resume here before, and hey, Brian, you're a pretty big deal here. Your music has been performed by symphonies in Boston, Atlanta, Nashville, Cincinnati, Munich. I read where you had a fellowship up at Tanglewood. You got the shirt on.
Yeah, I got
that magical place. And you're on your way to Australia. Is that right? You get some fellowship or some deal going on there?
Oh, I had a Fulbright.
Yeah.
Back in 2020 when the world sort of imploded and I had to come back home. But, I stayed in contact with the Sydney Conservatorium.
Okay.
But, yeah, we had some stuff.
What Marjorie's trying to say is, what she's trying to say is, why are you on this show then?
Well,
I think is the question.
That's not what I was going to say.
What are you trying to say?
Smarty pants over there. I was going to ask not Brian to comment on it, but you, Ashley. I mean, this is a big deal composer here you got with you for this performance.
Yeah, I mean, Brian is great, and Brian is a great human being. So Brian was, apart from my co-founder, Anthony R. Green, who's a composer, Brian was our first ever composer in residence. So we have known each other for several years.
Absolutely.
And have stayed in touch. During that 2020 sort of meltdown, we had a project, Black Composer Miniature Challenge, and invited composers from really all over the world to write 30-second miniatures. And Brian, you wrote, I think, Hoedown, Isolation Hoedown, or something like this. And so anyway, we've had many touch points over the years, and out of respect and collegiality.
That's the voice of Ashley Gordon, co-founder of the Castle of Our Skins. Robin Baker's here from Celebrity Series, and the composer is Brian Neighbor. Staying with you, Ashley, for a second. Brian was saying a minute ago, talking about spaces that are not very welcoming. Is Boston in 2025 a welcoming place for a Black Arts collective?
I think there's a growing movement, especially on the city level, on trying to support small organizations. So Castle of Our Skins being a small nonprofit. So we've had from the city a lot of generosity. Our first ever grant that we ever received for $1,000 was from the city of Boston. We just recently won a bid through the city of Boston for our own space, physical space, at the former Harriet Tubman House, and have had many partnerships, for instance, with the Barr Foundation, Celebrity Series of Boston. So we've been able to, over 12 years, make relation and make friends, and I think that's really important. So within those circles, yes, it feels it feels like it can be.
And Robin Baker, elaborate a little bit on what you said before about the Celebrity Series. That people may not know exactly all about you, so tell them a little bit more.
We have an Arts for All program, which includes neighborhood arts. It's our largest program in both Boston and Cambridge, and it includes 70-plus visits to schools, workshops, commissions, and live performances. So we're very pleased to have expanded it over a number, like 12 years or so, and the series as a whole is extremely supportive of community programming, both in artists and youth development as well.
Yeah, I read you guys actually had done stuff with Boston Children's Chorus. I think you were in a juvenile detention center as well. What was that about?
Coming up, actually, so this project, which will be at the Bethel AME Church tomorrow, I said what I said, we'll bring it down to Connecticut at the Quick Center in Fairfield, Connecticut, a repeat performance, and then also going into a juvenile correctional facility and doing some youth work as well. So this piece and everything about this program, which is all around the repetition as Black people to defend and to advocate and to, through music, through songs, through our civil rights and protest songs, bring that to different spaces, bring that to youth as well in Connecticut.
Brian, can I ask, is it okay?
Go ahead.
I ask this almost every musical performance, but since you're not from here, you haven't heard it, so you won't say I've heard this 12 times. This all started when Andres Nelsons was on our show, who's obviously the music director of the BSO, and it may have been right after Putin, he's from Latvia, when Putin invaded Crimea, but it was around that time, and he talked about the importance of the arts, music in particular, when there's so much pain in the world or in your community and that sort of thing. And we were talking to whoever was here last week, and they said to us, not only did they agree with that, they felt that the audience hears what they perform differently in horrible times than in normal. You're nodding in agreement. Do you want to respond to that? Do you agree with that?
I'm kind of going through it right now. I have to be honest, I have an opera that's slated to be premiered by the Kennedy Center next year.
Oh my gosh.
And what are you deciding to do?
Well, we're working it out. That's all I can say.
What does that mean in English?
It's in flux.
We're hoping that things will happen because it's very much rooted in the same things that we are preaching about here. And so I wonder if it will just be labeled as something and then just slashed off the table.
So you haven't made a decision yet? I don't mean to.
Oh, no, we're going.
We're
going for it, but the team within, the Kennedy Center, we've been working stuff out. Yeah, I didn't know if I wanted to talk about that, but it means a lot, now more than ever.
When is that? We'd love to talk to you after. If you don't, if you could call us. When is the performance?
It's supposed to be sometime in 2026.
We'd love to talk to you after that.
Well, you were just talking about your mom and dad and what they went through in the civil rights movement, and we were just rather pathetically talking before about, this is the day not to buy stuff for a day, and whether we were making the big decision to give up Amazon Prime, which does not seem like that much to do. But you and your family live really putting yourselves on the line for civil rights, and a lot of us really haven't put ourselves on the line at all for what's going on right now. What do you think about that?
Indeed, I feel like a lot of times, they didn't really have a choice, but I do admire the strength of both sort of sides of the Black collective at the time, the ones that left and had to endure the strength of moving to a new place and adjusting to still dealing with discrimination, in other places, and then the folks who stayed. But I always try to destroy sort of the misconception of where I'm from. I mean, I'm from a very nice city. But they've been the poster child of really what it means to embrace change.
Yeah.
And so it's really an honor at this point to just have come from a place that is so rooted, and once again, the poster child for change, but also to show, how you can maintain these things going forward. So it's
you're in a city now that needed to do a lot of change on the same front, I should say, by the way. I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
Brian,
Yeah, it's an ongoing effort for sure.
Could you tell us, Ashley, about this Black Student Union Fellowship thing that you guys do?
Sure. So for the past 4 years, we've worked with Black Student Union students, music students, graduate, from New England Conservatory, Boston Conservatory, Berkeley, Boston University, Longy, Northeastern. I may be missing a school, but in any case, a lot of schools in the area. And when I was a student, I'm an alum, as my co-founder from New England Conservatory. we didn't know the jazz students who were rehearsing next door if we were a classical musician. So within the same institution, there's a lot of siloing, and then certainly the Charles River is a big silo, and then a block away. So wanting to create fellowship and wanting to create space for support, affinity space for support, and more importantly, to be able to welcome someone into a community. So a lot of our fellows we've actually commissioned and we've hired. We have Deshaun Gordon King on flute, who's an alum of our program, who now plays with us. We have fellows who have worked with us and have come to us for mentorship over the years. So it's a way to create the community in the space, the welcome space that I think we need in Boston.
What was the thinking behind that siloing? Because it would seem it would be nice to mix the Bach and the Beethoven with the jazz and with why not mix it up?
Some of it is traditional conservative institution, and some of it is the sense of independence and the I statements. I'm focusing on me. I'm focusing on my technique. And certainly as a student, there's a place for that. But I think the embrace of trying to do something a little bit outside of the box is really one that I think an institution can really help foster.
I am told our colleagues here are going to start warming up in the background. Can you tell us what we're going to hear this time around?
We're going to hear, and I'll turn this over to Brian. We're going to hear the last movement, We Shall Overcome, from Sketches of the Movement.
Of your thing?
Absolutely.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, this is his arrangement.
So you're nervous now?
No.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Okay, so we're going to hear him warm up for a second, and then you're going to hear this beautiful wind quintet. Marjorie, do you want to say again when the
there's
performance is?
There's going to be a free concert at Bethel AMA Church. That's in Jamaica Plain. People don't know. The show is I Said What I Said, a showcase of Black excellence and a chance for audiences to reflect really on their own power and agency and creative strength. And this is the Black Arts Collective, Castle of Our Skins, and you are soon to have this new place in the old Harriet Tubman House, a permanent place, which is absolutely wonderful.
And they go to celebrityseries.org for information on this. Are you ready, you fivesome? And here they are again. That was incredible.
That was the music of the folks behind Castle of Our Skins. The show is tomorrow, 3 p.m., Bethel AM Church in Jamaica Plain. For more information,
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit ComcastBusiness.com. In his 30th year as a performing artist, world-renowned Italian tenor Andrea Bocelli and special guests put on a concert of breathtaking proportions. Watch great performances tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Presidents Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy of Ukraine are meeting this hour at the White House for talks aimed at leading to an end to Russia's war with Ukraine. Both are expected to discuss at least the framework of an agreement that grants the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals. For a second day, laid-off USAID employees are returning to their former workspaces to quickly collect their belongings and leave. It's all part of DOGE cuts the Trump administration says are needed to help return the U.S. to better financial health. But critics argue the way the administration's doing it is irresponsible and will cause long-term harm to the country. Yesterday, many employees at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration were notified they too have been fired. NPR's Alejandra Barunda reports.
If you checked the weather today, you interacted with the agency known as NOAA.
NOAA is America's top ocean, weather, climate, and environmental science agency.
That's Tim Gallaudet. He led NOAA under the first Trump administration. Gallaudet warned that deep cuts to the agency's staff or budget could hamstring its ability to provide services many Americans rely on, like free weather forecasts or tidal predictions that help keep seafaring ships safe. The fired staffers were so-called probationary employees. That means they were relatively new to the agency or had recently gotten a promotion. The Trump administration has asked all agencies to make further staff cuts and budget cuts in coming weeks. Alejandra Barunda, NPR News.
A grassroots movement is calling for a nationwide economic blackout today. The People's Union USA is leading a social media launch movement urging people across the U.S. to show their resistance to corporate greed by taking part in a 24-hour boycott in store and online of major retailers in favor of local and small businesses. Concerns continue to mount over a measles outbreak after medical officials in Washington state publicly confirmed a new case yesterday. Kentucky and New Jersey have also reported new cases. None of the cases has been linked, though, to the outbreak in West Texas, where an unvaccinated child died. Some school districts in Texas are below vaccination rate targets. Olivia Aldridge of member station KUT has more.
Austin Independent School District is one of the largest in Texas. School officials say the overall measles vaccination rate is around 95%, on target with public health experts' recommendations. But the rate for incoming kindergartners is lower, around 88%. School officials say that number is on the rise after taking a hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. Elena Bejarano heads up health services for the district. Although the measles outbreak hasn't reached Austin yet, she said the district is on guard.
If something like this happens, we're always tracking it and trying to prevent it.
More than 120 people have been sickened in the West Texas outbreak so far. I'm Olivia Aldridge in Austin.
It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Emergency road work continues on the Mass Pike westbound just before Route 495 in Westboro. The road remains closed back at Route 9 in Framingham. Left lane is also closed on the eastbound side. Video shows very large cracks in the road and a steam shovel and a bucket loader assisting work crews in cleaning them out and then filling them back in with fresh tar. Officials say drivers should expect delays and are encouraged to seek an alternate route. For now, though, all traffic being diverted to Route 9 at exit 111 in Framingham. The value of the parent company of the South Coast Wind has taken a $260 million hit thanks to President Trump's executive order on offshore wind projects. New Bedford Light reports that the reduction in value includes 3 offshore wind projects here in the United States. The report also points out that the Trump administration's policies on offshore wind projects could cause years of delays in offshore development. And Nantucket-based Cisco Brewers is coming to Boston. The Nantucket Current reports that plans are in the works for the brewery to open a year-round beer hall and a seasonal beer garden at the site of the original Tasty Burger on Boylston Street, just 1 block from Fenway Park. Cisco CEO Jay Harmon says the plans were approved by the Boston Zoning Board of Appeals on Tuesday. The new spot will be called Cisco Fenway. Meanwhile, Cisco has launched a collaborative beer with the New England Revolution ahead of their first home game on March 1st tomorrow. The beer is called Defend the Fort, and it's widely available through Massachusetts. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from ARM, committed to delivering innovative, advanced computing designed to enable worldwide companies to unleash the capabilities and experiences of AI. The future of AI is built on ARM. ARM.com. This is NPR.
He is Jim Braude. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. A little programming note. Wednesday, the day that Michelle Wu is going to be down in Congress talking about immigration laws in Boston with a bunch of other mayors. We are also going to be joined that day. We'll dip in and out of the testimony, of course, but the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell, is going to be with us. And next week, former EPA head Gene McCarthy is going to join us to talk about the slashing and burning of the Environmental Protection Agency. And then former Washington Post editor Marty Barron, of course, former editor of the Boston Globe as well, talking about the rollover of the Washington Post to apparently placate Donald Trump. Hello again, Jim.
And by the way, he was the editor of the paper when Bezos was there. So he has, as he described in his book.
When Bezos didn't do those kinds of things.
Exactly. So in November, Governor Healy signed a $4 billion economic development bill infusing funds throughout the state for things like AI, life sciences, climate tech, and clean energy. We're joined now at the library to talk through some of the details of the $4 billion investment and more, and how we can withstand threats coming from the federal government by Economic Development Secretary Yvonne Howe. Secretary, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Secretary Shirley Leung, who's with us a lot, she's a great columnist of the Boston Globe, tells a great story about how I believe you were together and all of a sudden a call came in from the governor of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey. Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, first of all, Shirley is the best. We are good dim sum friends, and we actually share the same Chinese necklace from our grandmother. So you'll often see us wearing these big Mr. T-style gold necklaces that bring us good luck. But we're so grateful for Shirley and actually for you too, and for everything that GBH does. I think we now realize more than ever what's at stake in democracy, and we need awesome media folks like you. So yes, I had a long career in business and have been an investor. I've been a board member. I've been a CEO, a CFO, a COO, and never thought I would be in government. I was sitting at home in December of 2022, and my cell phone rang, and it's like the week before Christmas. And so I figured, okay, it must be the kids' school. They're missing some form, or the doctor's office. Picked up my cell phone and it said, "Hi, this is Maura Healey." So then I thought, okay, I'm going to wait. This is like a robo-dial. She's going to ask me for money or something like that. Because I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I wasn't involved in her campaign. I wasn't, super active. And then she said, no, this is actually Maura Healey. Is this Yvonne Howe? I just got elected. And I was like, I know, I voted for you. So I was like, this is not a robodial. And she said she was putting together her cabinet, and she really wanted someone with business background. She'd heard my name from several people. Would I meet with her? So we had lunch the next day, and then a couple weeks later on New Year's Day, I got this job offer, and I was sworn in on January 17th of 2023.
Wow.
So I've now been in this role for a little over 2 years. Wow, it's a tremendous privilege. What an honor to be
Can we
in this
stay at
role.
the beginning for
Yeah.
a second? While you were, I think it's fair to say, wildly successful in the private sector, you had no government experience. Was that a daunting thought to you to sort of switch venues at least, let's say?
Yes. When we had lunch, the day after she called me, I had lunch with her, and it was the first time I also met the lieutenant governor. I said to them, just so you're clear, I don't have any background in government. I know business, I know startups, I know big companies, I know investing, but I haven't even stepped foot in the state legislature. So this is not, my area of expertise. And they said, no, that's what we want. We want someone who understands how the economy works and who understands businesses from that side of things. And it was daunting, but the great thing for me is that I came into office and inherited this great team. We have folks from the Patrick administration, from the Baker administration, new folks from the Healey-Driscoll administration, and I've gotten just an incredible education from everybody, including legislators who've all been so patient with me.
Okay, obviously they've been patient with you when they're not on their 5-month vacation. Is that correct? Just want to be clear.
No,
Is that correct?
All of us are always working, all the time.
So could you do us a favor so we can break this down in digestible chunks for people? This economic development bill I mentioned has got a lot of parts, a lot of really important parts. We've talked to the governor about some of them. Give us briefly what the highlights are, and then we'll go one by one and talk about what we're doing, what the state's doing, and whether any of that is at risk because of what's coming from Washington.
Yeah, and let me just give you a little bit of context. So let me start with the beginning. So one of the first things I learned when I came into this role in January of 2023 is that in our state, we are required by our legislators, which I think is a smart move, you have to do an economic development plan, first year in office. So I said to the governor, well, we kind of have a homework assignment. I could kind of phone it in and just kind of check the boxes, or we could really do it. You know the governor. She said, no, we really need a plan. So we took it very seriously. We went across the state, got all kinds of input, looked at all kinds of data. We published this economic development plan called Team Massachusetts. You'll hear me say that a lot because we have the best team in our state, and it's called Leading Future Generations. And it's called Leading Future Generations because one thing we realized in doing this plan is that we've been wildly successful in our state. We're $750 billion GDP. We lead in so many industries. We have wicked smart people and awesome talent. But the world is changing very quickly. This competition is changing. Technology is accelerating. This is not the time for us to hang out. So we published this plan in December of 23, and we said we have to bring it to life. Right now, it's 66 pieces of paper. How do we bring this to life and really make this happen? So we converted that plan into a bill that we filed in March of 2024 called the Mass Leads Act. This is a big economic development bill. It's $4 billion, and it has several big components. So one is it has $1 billion for life sciences. If you go back to 2008, when Governor Patrick was here, we were nowhere on the map in life sciences. We took a big bet then. Governor Patrick put $1 billion. Governor Baker re-upped it. We are now by far the world's leader in life sciences. This is not the time to stop. So this is another $1 billion to lengthen our lead in life sciences. The next $1 billion is for climate tech. Just like we were in 2008 with life sciences on the early innings of that industry, here we are in 2025. This is the existential crisis of our time. This is the threat to our humanity. And we have the best and brightest brains working in our state on how to fight climate change. And not only will we do the right thing in reducing emissions, but in that process, just like in life sciences, we will create amazing companies, amazing jobs for everyone in our state. So we are Governor Healey is making a big investment in being the leader in climate tech. So there's $1 billion there. The other $2 billion are across many different areas, including $100 million just for AI, which again, we're at the very early stages of this incredibly powerful tool. There are several hundred millions of dollars for regional tech hubs. There's a whole bunch of money for infrastructure, for important investments in, kind of main streets and towns, for small businesses, for community development, for, rural areas. So this is a large economic development bill.
So let's start in the order you did. Life sciences. I'm assuming that research is a pretty critical piece of this. We learned yesterday from either Joe Curtatone or Heather Tackle, and I can't remember who said it, that we get the most NIH funding per capita, I believe it is, of any state in the country. A lot of that's at risk. So how worried are you about the future of life sciences despite these huge investments?
So let me say a couple things. One is that I do not agree with the Trump proposal to reduce NIH funding. So just to kind of explain my view, I'm a business person by background, except for the last 2 years. So if you're a business person, you look at the different things that you do. And in our country, led by our state, we are the world's leader in life sciences. This is like the best thing that we do in our country. If you're running a business and you have a product that is the best in the world, the last thing you would do is to cut funding for that product. Why would you do that? The only thing that does is hand this over to the competition. And so I am very concerned about these proposed cuts. And I also think that it's more important than ever that we have the Mass Leads Act, because we are going to work together with our community. The governor and I convened a meeting with all of the CEOs of the hospitals and the universities to talk about how we can work together to support this ecosystem and continue to lengthen our lead and do the right things.
But the reality is, even with $1 billion investment in some corollary things, ancillary things, we can't possibly on the state level fill a hole that's created by the federal government, can we?
No, the gap is very big. It's going to be very hard to fill the whole gap. But also, let's be clear, this isn't just impacting our state. It impacts us more than others, but many states are having this issue. So we're going to partner with all of our friends, and this is a bipartisan issue. And many states are actually in much worse position than us. So the fact that we have Mass Leads, the fact that we have this incredible ecosystem means we're going to weather this better, and it's going to force us to be more nimble and more creative. I said this the other day to the convening. It's easy to be a good team and to win when times are good. When you have challenges like we do now, this is when the best teams step up and we figure out how to hustle. And so this is going to force us to find new ways to work together.
We're talking to Yvonne House, Secretary of Economic Development from Massachusetts.
Is there some hope? You mentioned other states besides Massachusetts are in this mess, and they may not have the money that Massachusetts does. So is there any hope that there could be enough pushback to change things, or is this just going to be the way it is, especially when you think about diseases and all that stuff?
Let's just be clear. I mean, it sounds very abstract, and when you describe it, you kind of say, oh yeah, of course, like we don't need this, indirect costs, and this is, of course, we don't want government waste. That's all true, but that's not what this is. These things are labeled indirect costs, but it's the wrong name. These are actually the resources to do fundamental science, for equipment, for space, and these are the next cures for cancer, for Alzheimer's, for obesity, for diabetes. These are going to impact people's lives for generations to come. That is what we're cutting, and many states are going to feel this, and we are partnering with them. For example, one of the things we did under the Biden administration is we competed as a state to win one of the 2 ARPA-H hubs. So there were only 2 winners, us and Texas. So we are communicating a lot with Texas to say, hey, we're in this together. We all want to do more in solving disease and investing in these areas. How can we partner together? But we need everyone to step up. This is a time when we all need to be vocal and to work together.
Yvonne Howe, climate tech, in a minute, I understand why, for example, Donald Trump wants to eliminate as much wind power as he possibly can, even potentially permitted wind power, even though allegedly those are protected, because he's in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry. When you're home at night and are 100% honest, not that you're not here, and you're talking to your family about why, after this presentation you made about how critical research is, what's the motivation other than to pay for his tax cuts to get rid of research that makes this country stronger in so many ways? What's the rationale, would you say?
It's really hard to understand because I am a business person, so I understand kind of that world. None of these things make sense to me. I mean, if you just look at all the things that DOGE is doing. So when you're in a business, you try to be more efficient. You try to, cut expenses that you can. You don't do it willy-nilly, and you don't go after the muscle and the bone. DOGE in total is going to save something like $9 billion. The Trump tax cut that's proposed in the budget is $90 billion. So you're going to cut the bone and muscle of the things that we are the best at in the world, that is going to actually help people live better, healthier lives, and then give 10 times that away to the wealthiest people in this country. How does that make any sense? So it's very hard to understand from an economic perspective.
Well, Chuck Todd told us yesterday he thought they just increased the deficit, but let's assume they do what other people think, which is cut Medicaid. Shirley Leung, our frequent guest, wrote a piece about eds and meds providing, 1 million jobs in Massachusetts. If Medicaid is cut dramatically, obviously a lot of those million jobs disappear. What's our plan on that front?
So Secretary Walsh, I think, is all over this, and she and the governor have been working on this. But Medicaid cuts, let's just also be clear, this is just the beginning. We're little over a month in, and I think we can't pretend that this is going to be over soon. There are going to be many other things coming. So we're preparing on all fronts. Looking at Medicaid, looking at Medicare, looking at vaccinations, looking at all the different programs, and NIH is just the first piece out. And so we are creating contingency plans. And again, we're in a lucky place because we have such an awesome ecosystem and such wicked smart people, and we have resources because of all the success we've had in things like mass leads.
That's the voice of Economic Development Secretary from Massachusetts, Yvonne Howe. There was a piece back in December in the Globe talking about, you mentioned before that we're a global leader in life sciences, and this is in December again, and talking about how we want to be the same for climate tech sector, and Jim referred to the climate problems before that are now before President Trump in terms of like the wind farms that we have, or maybe even Bill Keating, the congressman, says we're going to get the bridge fixed. That's not a climate thing, but it's a necessary thing. Yeah, it's like Sagamore Bridges and maybe the Bourne Bridge to the Cape. But anyway, what does this slashing and burning of climate tech mean for us?
So I think a couple of things. One is that we are betting in our state, and we have the smartest and brightest working on long-term problems. It doesn't matter who the politician is. We know that climate change is happening. We feel it every day in our state, but also you look at the fires in Los Angeles. Yeah. You look at the droughts. You look at the floods. This is accelerating, and the science proves that out, and we in our state, we believe in science. So we are in a political environment today in this country, but that doesn't negate the science and the data. And so we are going to need these solutions. And actually, the Trump administration, it's hard to know exactly how they're going to play out. They're definitely against offshore wind. It's, again, hard to understand why. But they actually are pretty open to other areas, like fusion, like nuclear, and other different technologies. And also, when you look at climate tech, it's a very diverse set of technologies. So there's things here that are around, kind of carbon neutral cement, around,
What's that?
Sublime systems. So they're spun out of our universities here, and they're actually opening a factory up in Holyoke, creating all kinds of awesome, career path, great jobs for people who don't have college degrees in Holyoke. We have Boston Metal, green steel. There's all kinds of other technologies that are actually going to be more efficient, more cost effective, and also happen to be great for the climate.
Maybe I should have said this to you, but you're a very positive person. Would you be willing to replace one of us on the show so there's a little more balance here?
I think just so we're clear, what is happening, I'm the first in my family to be born in this country. Oh. My grandmothers had their feet bound. My grandfathers fought in China with Chiang Kai-shek. They fought against the Japanese. They fought against the communists. They had to flee to Taiwan. My parents came to this country with almost nothing. I am deeply indebted to this country, and I'm very patriotic because of all the opportunities this country has given me. But I'm old now, I grew up thinking that this country was the best place on earth.
Yeah, me too.
And I grew up thinking that the future would always be better than the past, that we wouldn't repeat the mistakes of World War II, we wouldn't repeat all of these terrible things, and the future was always going to be better. I have 2 teenage girls, 18 and 16. Here we are in 2025. I did not think we would be sitting where we are, and I hear from them all the time about how we've screwed things up, and they're worried about climate, and they're worried about these wars that are happening. They're worried about what's happening in D.C. They didn't think they would be teenage girls and having to see, Roe versus Wade getting reversed. So we are living in really crazy times and not what we expected. But the thing that gives me great optimism and hope is that when I travel around the state and I go visit all these amazing people we have in our state, including here, what other state has all these people who are taking time out of their day to come and be part of this conversation? We are so lucky in our state, and that's why I talk about Team Massachusetts. When we work together across the public sector, the private sector, big companies, small companies, every part of the state, we are unstoppable, and this is the time for us to lead. And by the way, 250 years ago, it wasn't easy for this ragtag group of patriots in Lexington Concord without a lot of weapons to go against a giant British army. And they started this revolution. They led the revolution. They won the revolution. This is our time again to lead. And this is going to be hard work, but we got to do the work together.
I'm going home.
Okay.
Can we talk? Can I get
AI? We talk about the AI. How about you? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, let's get down to it.
Oh, let's get down to it.
We need more chargers. I mean, can we? So we have. This is actually, maybe it is not generically your fault. When we read this, we've only mentioned this 4,000 times. $7.5 billion for the infrastructure for EV chargers. I think the Washington Post, which at least on its news pages is still pretty responsible, said 8 were built a couple years later. And in the fact check by whomever, Associated Press, they said, don't blame Joe Biden, blame the states. The states didn't have the infrastructure or whatever the proper nomenclature is ready to spend this money. Where are we, and what kind of grade should we get for
EV chargers?
Chargers, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, so I know this personally. So we had never bought a new car because we're children of immigrants. And so we inherited our cars from our fathers, and then eventually they both died. So I was in this job when the car died, and I said, well, I'm in this administration, and I believe in climate change. We need to buy an electric vehicle. So we got an electric vehicle. We have personally had to live through the pains of range anxiety, and it's real. It's very hard, especially when we have cold weather. The range is not what you think it is. We need more infrastructure, but it is complicated. And one of the things we have to work on as a state, and which this governor and this administration is committed to, is making things easier. Because we've been so successful for so long, we've ended up adding lots of regulations and lots of permitting and lots of forms you have to fill out and lots of people have to have input. And so it makes it really hard to do things, not just on EV chargers, but everything, like things like housing. Yes. And so no one in our state is evil, no one's malicious, everyone wants to do the right thing. But we have to work together as a team to say, look, given where we are, how do we work together and make things easier? We have to have more EV chargers. We have to have more housing.
So when are we going to have more EV? Well, go ahead.
I just want to say, and after these horrible fires in Los Angeles, Gavin Newsom, the governor out there, said they were going to get rid of some of the regulations to rebuild. And I get frustrated. There was a story about Fort Devens the other day in the Globe about how there are all these empty houses there that could be housing, or we have this MBTA community bills to act. Thank you. Eventually, the goal is more housing, but it does seem to take forever. And I fear that by the time we get houses or granny flats or whatever we're going to build, it'll be 5 years, 10 years down it'll be too late.
Yes, I have the same. I have the same concern, and that's why we all in this administration feel an incredible sense of urgency. And again, it's hard because. So I was in Devens. I co-chair the Devens Housing Commission that came out of the Mass Leads Act. We had our second commission meeting this Tuesday, and we had folks from the towns of Air and Shirley and Harvard, and then the folks in Devens. Everybody wants more housing. But then it gets down to, well, what about traffic? What about schools? What about, do we have enough infrastructure with healthcare? And so these are complicated issues that require time. But again, I think when we work together and we have a sense of urgency and a shared goal, we can accelerate these things. And Secretary Tepper, my colleague in Energy and Environmental Affairs, led a whole effort to look at streamlining siting and permitting. And we are looking today in my office on a whole effort to look at all of our regulations around licensing. So we are trying to become more efficient and more expedient, but also still to do the right thing. Because there are some states who have no regulation. You can do whatever you want.
Right.
I'm not sure that's the right answer either, right?
Well, they lost those homes in North Carolina because they get rid of regulations and the houses
the
went away
answer
in the
for our
mudslide.
state is somewhere in the middle. We've had a long history of being successful. We've had Republican governors. We've had Democratic governors. We don't agree on everything, but we work together and we find a reasonable, practical solution. That's what we need to do now.
Okay, Secretary Howell, let's revisit one thing you said a minute ago. You didn't say you made about $1 zillion in the private sector, and you want us to believe that you were driving your parents' car until a year ago?
Yes. I sold my company to Amazon, and I was driving a Honda Accord from 1998 that was so beat up, and people were like, wait, this is what happens when you work in private equity and you sell your company? But that is our family, yes.
Wow. And
yes.
Did it die, or you decided to splurge?
It died. We actually went to the mechanic, and he said, it'll cost you like several $1,000s to fix it, and then 3 months later you're going to be back. Please just buy a new car.
Okay.
So you can afford it.
I think you made a wise choice.
Okay. So bottom line here, we're out of time, but I just want to make sure. So you are optimistic.
I am. I would say I am. I have actually. I stole this term from one of our incredible leaders here, Nubar, who runs Flagship Pioneering, and he helped start Moderna. He talks about paranoid optimism. So I do not want us to be complacent. This is not the time for us to hang out.
I'm writing that
we
down.
need to hustle. We need to be paranoid, and we need to be on our game. But I'm optimistic because you look at all the talent we have, you look at all the people who care so deeply about our state. We have so much here to work with. If anyone is going to lead for this country and for the world right now, it's Massachusetts. place to be.
You are unbelievable.
Okay.
That was,
So
I feel much better.
Wait, do I have time to give you some gifts?
Yes.
I came with a goodie bag.
yes.
So first,
we love
I
gifts.
was
All the time you
told
want.
that it's lunchtime and you
Okay.
like food. This
We
is
do like
my
food.
Chinese New Year contribution. It's
Oh.
a little bit late, but this is the year of the snake, and we wish for auspicious fortune for our state and for the
nice.
world.
Thank
So
you.
these are
Thank you.
Chinese snacks. And the governor did mention the other day that I'm insufferably annoying about Team Massachusetts, in a good way, hopefully. But we don't have a huge budget in state government because it's taxpayer dollars. But we have these bracelets, and I really want to give you bracelets, and I want to give the whole audience bracelets.
Oh, my God.
Because
That's
we're
so
so
nice.
proud to have you on Team Massachusetts.
Says Team
And-
Massachusetts.
Thank you very much.
And the governor asked me, how many of these are you going to give out? And I said 7.1 million. Because that's how many people we have here. So I've given out maybe like 8,000. I have a ways to go, but I want everyone to have a bracelet. And we are talking about the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, which is starting this year. It's actually started last year with the Tea Party, but this year on Patriots' Day will be the 250th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord. And we have an awesome effort going on to celebrate this.
Oh, I like that.
So I have T-shirts, but the best part is the back. Because you forget how many firsts we have in Massachusetts.
Wow.
All of the firsts in our state. First public school, first Thanksgiving, first chocolate chip cookie, first computer, first missile, first birth control pill. This is who we are in Massachusetts. And so we got to celebrate not just the past, but the future and how we're going to lead in the future. So T-shirts for you all.
Thank you for all. We hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
We're so
Thank you
grateful
very
for you.
much. We have been speaking with Massachusetts Economic Development Secretary Yvonne Howe, and thank you very much for coming in and cheering us up before we depress everybody again in a couple of minutes. Okay, after a quick break, we are going to talk to Boston Medical Center's Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett. She's here. We're going to talk about, of course, about the measles vaccine now that we have had a death of a child out in Texas, flu vaccines, Medicaid cuts, mass health, all those things that are really not so optimistic. Anyway, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, a federal investigation uncovered serious safety problems at the Boston Housing Authority. And on this week's Joy Beat, how one mom donated thousands of onesies to premature babies after her own emotional experience. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked /1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And the Skating Club of Boston, presenting the ISU World Figure Skating Championships with over 300 athletes competing at TD Garden March 25th through 30th for the title of World Champion. Tickets at isuworlds2025.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now at the library by Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett. She's Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School, and Aspen Institute Health Innovators Fellow. And sadly, she has brought us nothing. Good to see you, Dr. Gergen-Barnett.
I can keep distributing.
Yeah.
How's that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Good cheer and good information. That's what she's brought us. But I wanted to start yesterday with the fact that they had this measles outbreak in Texas, and people may know that an unvaccinated child died of measles. But maybe I shouldn't have been surprised at the casual way that RFK Jr. dismissed this, calling it not tragic, not a horrible, preventable death, but not unusual.
Yeah.
And he got the number of kids wrong. It's only one
said
so
2.
far. Let's hope.
Yeah.
He also lied about why the kids were in the hospital. Maybe just didn't know. Said they were there for quarantine. The hospital said, no, they're there because they're measles and pneumonia. Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? He's already canceled these meetings on flu. I'm sorry. I'm going on and on.
Let me just kind of back up. So measles. I'm sure many of your listeners have been aware of this child who died yesterday, and actually This is the first child that's died in 22 years from measles. The first person who's died in a decade. And we actually thought measles was eradicated in 2000.
Yeah.
So we hadn't had any measles cases for 12 months. There have since then been places where people have gotten measles. CDC, FDA, Health and Human Services have come together, made a plan. I think the most concerning thing is that it is, again, the way in which it has been responded to from a federal perspective is creating a sense of sort of humdrum around it, where it's actually an emergency. The good news is, if there is good news, is that people in West Texas and New Mexico are quickly stepping up and getting their children vaccinated willy-nilly, recognizing that this is a very serious viral illness. It is, it has high fevers. Kids get these, bad spots in their throat. They get this kind of characteristic rash. And people can go forward and they can get their kids tested. But it's really, really infectious. It's actually one of the most infectious viruses that we know. And it can last on surfaces for 2 hours. So there was a case where we know one person with measles was going around West Texas and had was in all kinds of restaurants and places, and now they're trying to do contact tracing for people who have been there. So just, the public messaging and again, just feeling so grateful for the conversation I'm coming after in terms of thinking about what's happening in Massachusetts, is that if you are in a state where measles is endemic, making sure that your children are vaccinated and that you are still, your vaccines are still good. So we can talk about that.
I want to return to Kennedy, and not to just beat up Robert Kennedy. We had a caller yesterday who took us to, was it yesterday we were talking about vaccines or whatever day we're doing it? A caller or a texter took us to task saying, we're grown up enough, we can make up our own minds. When the head of Health and Human Services has a platform, I think it was at the cabinet meeting, I'm not sure, and a young person dies unvaccinated, speaks to the fact that, well, this happens every few months kind of thing, 20-some years, in fact, has virtually nothing to say about the death of a young person, other than the fact, as Marjorie said, she said there were 2 when there were only 1. To me, that sends a message that you don't have to take it that seriously.
That's
and while
correct.
the good news is a lot of families, as you say in Texas, so it does trickle down in the most negative of ways, right?
Absolutely. It creates a sense that everything's okay when it's not. And it's up to our federal leaders to be actually helping us execute what we need to do locally when there's an emergency. And, again, one of the things that we've talked about at length is when we had, we were in the height of the pandemic, we know that state response was critical for the way that we dealt with the pandemic, but we rely on federal information. And this goes to the flu, for instance. So we know that WHO is meeting right now. They're talking about what are the most common variants that we imagine will come out for 25, 26 for the flu. And therefore, how can we make a vaccine that's connected to those variants to protect people? So usually, we actually have a whole advisory committee. That's the FDA advisory committee, and they were slated to meet on March 13th. They always meet after the WHO. They hear all the information that WHO is given, and they say, yes, we agree, or let's think about it in this way, and then make a plan for what our flu vaccine is going to be. That meeting was canceled. So our FDA advisors are no longer meeting to discuss what will be in the flu shot for next year. So we have no federal response that's going to go forward.
What happens?
So we'll have to use the WHO blueprint, which is not...
Which we don't even belong to anymore.
Which we don't even belong to anymore. We still had 2 spots at the table with the WHO. It was sort of, we were grandfathered into it. But the fact is we're not able to, again, think about ways in which this is impacting the people of the United States of America and what kind of decisions we can make. And I wish I could be optimistic, and maybe I'm paranoid optimistic, but this is a really dire time in public health.
And just one last thing, because you're a physician. We get a lot of people who text us and say, like COVID, my body, my choice kind of thing, mocking the pro-choice rallying cry. But for vaccinations, your not being vaccinated can be very bad for an unvaccinated child who has some kind of immune disorder or can't get vaccinated.
Yeah.
It's a very selfish perspective.
Well, we have, literally until 2020, it was never even argued why people would get vaccinated. This was just routine, right? So you would go, you think about not only the health of your child, you think about the health of your community. You go to a school, understanding people were vaccinated. Part of what happened in West Texas is that a greater number of kindergartners are now unvaccinated, and they've signed, kind of declarations that they don't want to be vaccinated. And so it took us below the 95th percentile that we need to protect each other. And now, again, because there has been doubt that has been sown into vaccination, saying, actually, people are getting measles from the vaccine. So literally, that's some of the information that's been out there. We are now seeing, obviously, a lot of fear around vaccines. And on top of that, remember, a lot of these kindergartners grew up in the initial years of the pandemic. So we also had less access to places where people could come and get vaccinated. In Massachusetts, we figured it out. We drove around in vans. At Boston Medical Center, we had, things out on corners, vaccinating kids. So places figured out how to get by and do the work that we needed to do, but not all places either A, did that, or, they also hit the wall of people having concerns and fears about vaccines that were unfounded.
We're talking to Catherine Gergen Barnett from Boston Medical Center, BU, and places like that.
So one of the other things that is really concerning about what the Trump administration is doing there, they're cutting all this DOGE stuff, but they want to give these big, huge tax cuts, and they've got to find some place to cut in the federal government, but one of the only places they can cut in the federal government is Medicaid. And so you deal at a hospital where many patients have Medicaid for insurance. So what would those cuts mean?
Oh, so first of all, this hasn't happened yet. So I want to just be clear with the listeners that this is a massive threat, but it has not happened yet. What we do know is that the federal government wants to cut $880 billion in the next 10 years. We also know that Medicaid takes one of the largest parts of the budget. It's the largest health insurer for the people in the United States. In Massachusetts, we have 2 million people who depend on Medicaid. Over 50% or close to 50% of the children in Massachusetts depend on Medicaid. We also know that, hospitals like Boston Medical and all of, the safety net hospitals in the states heavily depend on Medicaid. So if we're talking about what's going to happen on the federal level, it will be absolutely catastrophic. There's even the smaller amounts of cuts, thousands of people will lose insurance. On top of that, people who are actually in nursing homes, guess what? Nursing homes are paid by Medicaid. You think it would be Medicare, but it's not. It's nursing homes are paid by Medicaid. So think about all those people as well who won't have the coverage. And so we are incredibly wary about what the implications could be. I do think this is an issue where people need to vote with their feet. They need to come out. They need to speak out. They need to really collectively think about what the impact could be, if not for themselves, then for folks in their community, and particularly thinking about children and all of the ways that the children in our state depend on Medicaid.
Well, the other thing, too, is, I've had friends, whose parents wound up going to nursing care, whose grandparents wound up to nursing care, and I was, stunned at how much these things cost. Oh. They can be $6,000, they can be $8,000, they can be $10,000 a month. And what happens often is they'll take the house, and they'll take somebody's house to pay for if they run out of money. But then when they run out of money, they end up being on Medicaid.
Correct.
And one of the things that we heard throughout, even before Trump came into office, was the problems with staffing nursing nursing homes, the problems with care in nursing
Absolutely.
homes. So I'm thinking to myself, boy, if you're not like Jeff Bezos and you don't have millions of dollars and you wind up in a nursing home that's been cut further because of Medicaid, that's
and then think about all the consequences that has kind of upstream, right? So you have all these people who are being admitted to the hospital, and then there's no place to send them in terms of nursing home because the nursing home won't be getting the dollars to take care of their people. So there's a huge amount of kind of circular impact that will have. Again, it hasn't happened yet, but we are very wary that it very well could happen, that there are Medicaid cuts.
You may have said this in my I was just watching what apparently is sadly a tense exchange between Zelenskyy and Donald Trump in the Oval Office, with Vice President Vance siding on the opposition to democracy, too. We'll talk about that in a minute. I don't know if you said this, but I believe Medicaid is the largest expenditure in the state budget.
Correct.
50% of it comes from the federal government. So while Yvonne Howe, a minute ago, acknowledged even in much smaller parts of the budget, the state can't fill in where the feds disappear.
Yes.
If the feds cut dramatically back on Medicaid, for those who will say, we'll just lobby the State House and they'll increase funding, this would be an astronomical increase in the state budget, which is pretty tight now. So this thing is huge. And by the way, if you want to know more about it, Mass Health is what we call Medicaid in Massachusetts. And this is a dramatic threat. And I'm so glad you mentioned the point that Marjorie and John Gruber mention all the time. It's not just poor people, who we sadly don't seem to care that much about these days, but your grandmother or your parent or whatever in a nursing home is in all likelihood totally dependent upon Medicaid dollars. So,
and half of the children in our state.
Right. It's unbelievable.
Yes.
Talking to Catherine Gergen Barnett.
I should have asked this before we moved off of measles, because I'm getting a lot of texts about this. Do people need booster shots?
I'm so glad that people ask. So actually, it's really interesting. So CDC first approved vaccines in 1968. So that's kind of, not that long ago, but long enough, right? So, and then 1989, we did two boosts, or two shots, one at, sort of age 1 and one between ages 4 and 6. You can, if you're in an endemic area, just for parents to listen to, you could actually get your child vaccinated as early as 6 months. So if you have any plans on going to, Texas anytime soon, please make sure your children are vaccinated. But for adults, so if you were born before 1968, you actually probably were exposed, right? And then for people who were got maybe one shot, you may consider testing your immunity. So you can actually get a titer. It's a measles titer. It's a very easy blood test. I do it all the time for pregnant people to make sure that they, in fact, are immune, because it can be very, very devastating for the fetus. And then for people who were born between sort of 1970s, 1980s, you also could consider, checking your titers. But the fact is if you've had 2 shots, you're 97% vaccinated, and that's lifelong.
And if you had measles as a child, which a lot of us did and remembered, and it was horrible, then you're okay.
You are okay, but again, if you have any concern, or if you're going to be in an area where you will be, there is a higher rates, then you can always go and get a titer blood test.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Before we continue with Catherine Gergen Barnett, for those who are not seeing this is just an unmitigated disgrace. It was disgraceful enough, as I'll mention in a minute, that the United States of America voted with Iran, North Korea, and Russia against the interests of the people fighting to protect their lives and their democracy in Ukraine the other day. But Trump says in this meeting, where he has raised his voice with President Zelenskyy, you got to be more thankful. Vice President Vance's uselessness in this meeting is to say to this courageous warrior, Zelenskyy, you're being disrespectful because he's arguing his case with the reporters. It is really, take a look, everybody, at our country in 2025, when this man and his people are fighting against a murderous dictator, and we apparently are on the wrong side. It's just unimaginably horrible. We're talking to Dr. Catherine Gergen Barnett. Another thing.
We really got to get a little bit, levity in here.
Yeah, we got
this
a
is
little
like
levity.
really.
I got the best
Between the
clementine I've ever had.
Zelenskyy
Yeah, what do you think you're going to Academy Awards favorite for Sunday?
It's just unbelievable.
Gene Hackman did some great movies.
Yeah.
Well, I can spend a minute on something that I misunderstand. Sure. Trump in his first term, and now a couple of days ago, did something that I thought was really good. But when I read experts like you, well, not you, but people who do what you do, they say it's not so good. What he wants is price transparency. Hospitals and others publish the real costs of things. I am of the belief that there's no such thing as bad transparency, but a lot of healthcare people whom I respect are quoted saying this may actually raise prices, not bring them down. So could you briefly explain what he's proposing to do and what you think of this proposal?
Yeah, I'm generally of the same mind as you in terms of transparency is always a good thing, right? I think that there is a concern, though, that as so many places are on the chopping block for money they may be spending too much or not spending enough. Price transparency may create some vulnerability. That being said, I don't understand the economics of it enough, why they would say it would raise it, to be honest with you. Will say that one of the things that we have been working with in Massachusetts is creating more price transparency in terms of how much is being spent or actually paid for the front lines, things like that. So we are always arguing for price transparency.
Does that help bring prices down?
Well, it actually helps say, where is the money going towards? Is it going towards somebody's pocket, or is it actually going to pay the nurses and frontline folks who are taking care of patients so that we can provide better care?
Talking to Dr. Catherine Gergen Barnett. I'm sorry, my apologies. I'm so distracted by this. We gotta change your guy's position next time. He's
I know. He's looking at the TV. But
Donald Trump also said, "You better make a deal or we're out." That's what he just said in a loud voice to the president of Ukraine. Wow. I'm almost.
Well, you're going to be talking about this in your two more things.
A little bit, yeah.
Maybe you should focus more on that.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I was just saying instead of what I was going to do, which seems a little silly at this particular juncture.
I don't know about that.
But before we go,
yes, please.
What about bird flu? I mean, it seems like it's
okay. We're on moderate alert for this being a pandemic. I will say that I am. I think many of us are watching this very carefully.
Yep.
So we actually, if people don't know, I'm sure everybody's talking about the price of eggs. There is a reason that price of eggs is so insane right now. 166 million poultry have been killed at this point. And so thinking about what's the number there, 12,000 wild birds, and about 70 humans. We know that there's, been just one fatality. One of the things that the Trump presidency has done is they're saying we're willing to pay the poultry farmers back for their loss of flocks, but nobody's talking about all the cows. And ways in which, that they may be protected. And what's more, and what's really, really important, is that Biden in January actually committed $590 million to Moderna to work on developing mRNAs specifically for bird flu-like illnesses. And so that was really important, right? Because you're thinking about how are we making sure that we're getting whatever kind of data that's coming out of the cows and the birds, and so we're ready to go with a vaccine. And the question is whether that money will now be withdrawn.
Now, I don't know if there's a uplifting disease we can talk about next time you come. I'm not sure.
Uplifting disease.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I will say
maybe
again,
a mild allergy, a little ragweed or something.
To go back on the shirt of first, and Massachusetts being the first place to have a chocolate chip cookie and
that's
all those
right.
things.
Yeah.
I will say every single day I wake up, I am so grateful to be living in this state.
That's right.
In terms of the work that we're doing. And medicine and health and the people who are here today, I just feel incredibly grateful.
This is a great place to be sick in.
It's a great place to be sick, and it's a great place to be well and to help others stay well. So
Doctor, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It's great to see you as always.
We have been talking with Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett. She's the Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovator. Thank you very much, Doctor, for coming in again. Okay, after a quick break, just enough time left for our two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, New England pushes back against bans on trans kids playing sports. LGBTQ and civil rights groups fight executive orders, and nearly 1 in 10 Americans identify as LGBTQ. It's our LGBTQ plus news roundtable. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Emerson Colonial Theater, with a Broadway production of Jason Robert Brown and Alfred Urie's musical Parade, coming to Boston for 2 weeks, this March 11th through March 23rd. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst, ranked the #1 public university in New England by U.S. News & World Report. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It's time for two more things, and as always, Marjorie has one of them.
Mine is following, I suppose, the theme of today, Americans getting depressed about living in the United States of America. Fed up is the headline from this study finds staff that talks about 2 in 5 Americans find living here no longer enjoyable, which is pretty bad. Millennials are the most upset, with a quarter of them wanting to relocate abroad, Jim. And they talk about trends like, rising housing costs, childcare costs, not making enough money to live a decent life. So guess where the first country they want to go to is?
I would say
Canada.
Canada.
It is Canada, and the Canadians are advertising all these products now on the shelves with Canadian flags on them, so you know they're not American.
Is that true?
They had a dilemma because they had a makeup remover that they couldn't find a good Canadian makeup remover, and they were buying the American makeup remover, very important, like our version of Pond's cold cream. But they finally found one, so people can get that up there and not have to buy American. The second country people want to go to is Italy, followed by England, then Australia, Ireland. I could go to Ireland. I could become a citizen.
You can?
Yes, if my grandparents. If you are the grandchild, you could. I don't know. Do you have any grandparents born in Russia or something like that?
Eastern
Jim?
Europe.
You could go to Russia.
Oh, that's good.
I don't know if you want to do that, but I believe if you have grandparents from, you can get a citizenship, and that qualifies me to go to Ireland to become a citizen. France, Switzerland, Costa Rica, and Germany comes in last. So anyway, people are fed up. They don't want to live here anymore. It doesn't make them happy anymore. This isn't a big trend, but 7 in 10 respondents said they're worried about the direction the country is heading in, and money worries is a big factor. And of course, what's going on around the country is a big factor.
7 to 10? What'd you say, 7 to 10?
7 in 10 are worried about the direction of the country, calling the American society toxic.
And the other 3 were asleep when the survey was done.
That's right.
Can I tell you, my one more thing was about the lead up to this meeting between President Zelenskyy and Donald Trump and Vice President Vance. But we just made an executive decision, and we're going to end the show at 1:30. We were going to talk about bidets, continuing our week of, what do we call it? Home Appliance Week here on Boston Public Radio. But we sort of feel a responsibility to talk about this disgraceful meeting in the White House and what your reaction is. So I'm just going to talk about this for a second, and what I was going to speak about was watching European leaders like Macron from France and Starmer, the new prime minister in the UK, having to come in and flatter Donald Trump, not even make an argument so much on the merits of supporting Ukraine, but the flatter. Did you see the thing where he handed the letter and mentioned it like 8 times from King Charles, inviting Trump? Trump holds the letter, he pats him on the arm, back and forth like this. I mean, the fact that it is degenerated to the fact that if you are not sycophantic with the President of the United States, you as an ally, or in the case of France and the UK, maybe former allies, can't have a discussion on the merits, but rather have to drown him in flattery is disgraceful. So I was going to continue with this, but I think what we'll do instead is we'll play a little sound from this, quote, set of tense exchanges in the Oval Office that was broadcast, I don't know, live, but moments after it happened between Trump, Vance, and Zelenskyy, and then get your thoughts about what you would like to see your country do.
Are we playing this now?
No, we're going to play when we come back at 1:30.
I would like to point out that flattering President Trump is apparently how the Tate brothers, those alleged human traffickers and sex
and rapists, alleged rapists,
abusers, got out of a prison in Romania. So I guess maybe if we start flattering him, Jim, we'll get
I don't think so.
A raise or something like that. 87. Oops, I'm not supposed
What's
to get
coming
the number.
up?
We are going up. We're going to have a
$26 for sensory chocolate tasting. We'll be sampling a variety of chocolates and learn some unique facts about cacao beans. Reserve your ticket by March 7th at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And MIT Federal Credit Union, helping members get started on their savings journey with the MIT Federal Credit Union Starter Savings Account, federally insured by NCUA. Memberships open to the general public. More at mitfcu.org. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Mobile, featuring data options that include streaming, browsing, and texting. More information is available at xfinity.com/mobile.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
toilet paper for a nice strong flow of water, hot or cold. We'll open the phone and library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. In a stunning display from the Oval Office moments ago, President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance engaged in a war of words with visiting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, raising serious concerns about the prospects of the U.S.'s ability to negotiate an end of 3 years of war between Russia and Ukraine. Tensions rose when Vance spoke out about a path to peace. He later accused Zelenskyy of never thanking President Trump, which Zelenskyy refuted. Zelenskyy proceeded to argue that his country had repeatedly tried to reach but was unable to secure a diplomatic solution with Russia's Vladimir Putin.
We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about?
Trump and Zelenskyy were due to talk about a deal that grants the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals as a way to recoup some of the money the U.S. invested in Ukraine's defenses against Russia. In recent weeks, Trump has moved toward closer relations with Putin, while his feud with Zelenskyy has escalated. Employees at the U.S. Agency for International Development continue clearing out their offices in Washington, D.C. NPR's Frank Langfitt reports.
Adam Thomas had cleaned out his desk Thursday. He'd worked at the agency for 2 decades.
My first wife passed away. She's honored on the memorial wall. She was a Foreign Service officer herself.
Antoinette Tomasek died from injuries in a car accident while delivering medical supplies in Haiti. Adam tried to take a photo of her name. The guard said no.
I explained my story to him, and he said, no, we have instructions. You are not allowed. No photos, no videos.
So you weren't able to get a photograph of your wife on the memorial wall?
I was not.
How did this all make you feel?
Gutted. Awful. Empty.
President Trump has said much of what USAID does is antithetical to American values. Frank Langford, NPR News, Washington.
Administration officials are confirming 29 alleged members of Mexican drug cartels, including senior gang kingpins, are now in U.S. custody. NPR's Brian Mann with the latest.
U.S. Justice Department officials say the 29 individuals face charges ranging from drug trafficking to murder and money laundering. They allegedly come from some of the top cartels, including Sinaloa and Jalisco Nueva Generacion. In a statement, U.S. Attorney General Pamela Bondi said, "We will prosecute these criminals to the fullest extent of the law." The Drug Enforcement Administration released a statement celebrating the capture of Rafael Caro Quintero. He's considered a drug kingpin, and the DEA alleges he murdered a U.S. agent in 1985. Mexico transferred these individuals into U.S. custody as President Trump announced a new 25% tariff on Mexican goods that he linked to the country's role in street drug smuggling. Brian Mann, NPR News.
The Dow is down 12 points. You're listening to NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Harvard University received more than $151 million in donations from foreign government sources between January 2020 to October 2024. According to the Department of Education, $100 million of that came from the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Bangladesh. In compliance with the Higher Education Act, universities must report contracts and gifts from foreign sources that are larger than $250,000. Harvard is the largest recipient of foreign investment among the Ivy League colleges, receiving nearly $200 million more than Cornell University, which is the second highest recipient. Stargazers in Massachusetts are in for a treat to close out February as all 7 planets in our solar system line up for what's known as a planetary parade. Whether you'll be able to see the parade depends on the weather, of course. The National Weather Service forecast calls for clear skies and warm weather today and Sunday, light rain tomorrow. And no, the planets are not in a straight line, but they are close together on one side of the sun. And if you're up for taking a look tonight, forecasters say go outside on a clear, cloudless night after sunset. The planets will shine brighter than the stars, and Mars will look like a reddish-orange dot. And if you miss the planetary parade, fear not. Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Mercury will all shine brightly during the total lunar eclipse or blood moon overnight on March 13th. It's now, what do we got? 28 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, committed to giving job listings increased visibility with relevant candidates through its sponsored jobs feature. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3. Thank you of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. It's time for actually the second edition of what's going to be a weekly segment on our show, Friday at 1, a media analysis segment, Press Play. Next week's guest, by the way, is Marty Barron. He's the Pulitzer Prize winning former editor of both The Globe and The Washington Post under Jeff Bezos, who we're going to talk about in a minute. Joining us now is Ron Mitchell. He, of course, is the editor and publisher of the Bay State Banner, the news outlet centered around Black and Latino communities in Massachusetts. Great to see you again, Ron.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Wall Street Journal columnist Callum Borchers, formerly a reporter at The Globe, used to work at BUR, used to work at The Washington Post, obviously can't keep a job. He is now, sad, but he landed fairly well. He's at the Wall Street Journal. Callum, it's great to see you, too.
I'm just trying to do the tour, play Billionaire Bingo.
Exactly, you're doing quite well, actually.
Wait a minute. Jim left something out. As I recall, you wrote you boosted Jim's street cred, such
Yes,
as
he
it
did.
is,
He did.
by writing a column a little while ago,
Oh,
a
you
few
did your
years ago
homework,
now,
Marjorie. Yeah,
about,
yeah.
well, I've heard the story from Jim now about 2,025 times. So when you wrote about it in the Globe, I was familiar with it. But Jim used to babysit for somebody. And if you don't know what this is about, by the way, we've got a little sound here. Here's GBH's own Paris Alston helping us out when Jim and she interviewed then VP Kamala Harris back in 2023.
We all have at least one thing in common, and that is love for Tupac Shakur. I know that's true for you because you are a Bay Area girl, and Jim, in fact, babysat him. You're kidding me.
His mother was my paralegal when I was a young legal services lawyer. I can't believe she's bringing this up.
Goodness. Wow. And I'm just a big hip hop lover, so that's what that is.
Yeah, Jim loved that she was bringing it up. He couldn't take it. What'd you think about Jim's babysitting days, Callum?
I was
Were you
surprised.
impressed too?
Well, it was such a great nugget. If I remember, this might have been when you were taking over at Greater Boston or something like that. And we were writing about it in the Globe, and it was this fun little nugget of personal bio that I don't think readers knew. So.
Made him really cool.
I only made, by the way, in all fairness, because Marjorie, of course, exaggerates everything, I made maybe 2,000 or 3,000 copies of the piece and distributed them on Boylston Street. Other than that,
only.
There was a nice cartoon sketch, as I recall.
It was
too.
actually, it was great. Ron and Callum, it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, well, let's start with this pretty disturbing story from Gallup about Americans' trust in the news media really slipping. It's at its lowest point in more than 5 decades. Republicans talk about not trusting the mass media more in the Trump era. So, I mean, there's a lot of depressing things about this. Generational patterns, young people don't believe the media either. So what do you make of this, Callum?
I mean, the only bright spot for me was if you look at the chart over time, right, it's been steadily trending down, and there was a nice uptick, a spike in 2018 when you had some really rigorous, robust coverage of the first Trump White House. And so my hope, please, is that we see something similar here the second time around, where the journalism institutions kind of repair that trust and credibility with some tough accountability reporting in the country.
Yeah, but Ron, that's the good news, I guess. The bad news is what Marjorie touched upon, to me, is that the age group that has the least trust in the media are the youngest people, meaning obviously the next generation. So are you conscious, and obviously they're going to be the consumers or non-consumers of what you both do. When you're doing what you do, are you conscious of this responsibility to try to bring people back to trusting information?
Without question. It's really important that we try to restore trust in journalism.
How do you do that?
You tell the truth. You shame the devil, as my mom used to say. You have to continue to be true journalists. I think that what we've seen is a trend over the past 10 or 15 years to what I call influencism, not journalism, where folks target stories to get the biggest response in the beginning, and then in the back end of the story to say, oh, well, those things that we scared you about in the beginning, that's not really the full story, and here it is. But once you've already started down that rabbit hole of motivating people to respond, instead of just telling them the truth and letting the chips fall where they may, you create that misperception, and you distrust. And I also think that journalism has been weaponized.
What do you mean?
During the first Trump administration, they went after the journalists, alternative facts, which we all know are just lies, and basically trying to discredit reputable news sources for their own end.
You're doing what is the most believable kind of journalism, which is a local newspaper, the Bay Street. They talk about that people trust newspapers more than television, but again, there's very few local newspapers. So, I mean, you're doing the Lord's work, as they would say in church on Sundays.
Well, we're definitely, when me and my partner Andre Stark purchased the paper 2 years ago, it was really a goal to move it into as fast as we could, to modernize it as quick as we could, to increase the web presence, to break stories into smaller pieces. We now have a half-hour streaming newscast where we break into a whole bunch of pieces, and our social media teams send out short versions of all of our stories because we want to get the younger folks back into focusing on real news. When they get their news on their cell phone, it's easy for it to be tainted or created in a way to motivate them, and that's what we saw over the past couple of elections in a lot of areas. So it's really important that we bring our news to the young folks where they are, that we reach them. Folks don't read papers anymore. It's all online now, especially with the younger audience. So we're really doing everything we can to break up our stories into smaller bits and pieces and reach that younger audience.
Let me say one more challenge, I think, Callum, particularly for a place like yours, is I don't think people get, no matter how much we say it, in responsible newspapers, there's an editorial side and there's a news side. I think everyone would agree your editorial page is a conservative-leaning paper. Your reporting, we talk about it all the time, is amongst the most credible in America. I mean, it's stunning. Not stunning. It is great. Is that part of the problem, that people don't understand that there's an opinion section of a paper and a fact news part of a paper?
It's a huge thing I worry about. I think a lot of reporters do, is that lack of distinction between the news page and the opinion page. It's sort of related to the decline of print in a way, Ron, right? Because when you have that hard copy paper in front of you, you see, okay, I'm reading the opinion page. When you just get the news delivered in your feed, maybe you're not looking carefully at which section it comes from, and you say, oh, this news outlet is so biased, when maybe what you're really just reading was supposed to be a biased opinion.
Well, and I think what exacerbates this, Marjorie and I've talked about this a lot, and I'm sure you think about it a lot. When you have a great reporter, I'll give you Maggie Haberman, for example, from the New York Times, who goes on CNN constantly and does voice an opinion. She's conscious of there being a line, but she voices an opinion. I don't think they should do it. I mean, I know the editors make the decision, but it seems to me, Ron, at least, when you have somebody who's writing factual stories, not opinion, and then goes and voices an opinion at 9 o'clock on a cable news station, you blur that line that Callum was just talking about, don't you?
Well, I think that the cable news shows at that 9 o'clock hour are all opinion. So I think it definitely does, for the average viewer, create a gray area and confuse people. But I think that because at 9 o'clock, it is all opinion and not news. It's all opinion for MSNBC, CNN, and most channels, you know, the other ones, you know, that are all opinion all the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, even the ones that profess to do their best to be down the middle and non-biased, when you hit that 9 o'clock hour, you're into opinion programming.
I think cable news has really been bad for the trust in the media, because it is a lot of talking heads endlessly talking. Then you see some disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or some horrible shooting or something, and then you see the actual reporting, and I think it switches into something you can believe in. But I'm interested in Rupert Murdoch, because I worked for Murdoch when he was at the Boston Herald, and you did notice a big change in the paper. It became much more, but he was not all that much, and we're a little paper compared to the Wall Street Journal. But of course, Rupert Murdoch runs Fox News, and he's got all these tabloids all over Great Britain and all over Australia. He hasn't done what Jeff Bezos has done, which I kind of find interesting.
At the Wall Street Journal.
He could do it. Well, he's done it at Fox, but when Fox started, it was Roger Ailes, not a good guy, a terrible creep and sexual harasser, but a decent newsman. What do you think?
Well, I think what you're hitting on is the question that a lot of reporters, certainly some of my former colleagues at the Post, are asking themselves this week is, where does it stop? Right, because you've seen some of them tweeting, okay, well, if I see this rightward lurch that Bezos is talking about on the opinion page seep into my news coverage, I'm going to have a real problem with that, and I'll resign in protest. But if the answer is that it stops on the opinion page, I suspect a lot of journalists will grumble about it. They may not like it, but they can live with it. And I think that, you know, one thing that's interesting as I look at it, I know some of the players involved here, right? The executive editor at the Post now is Matt Murray, right? Who was the executive editor of the Journal when I started at the Journal, right? So he has, as you said, Marjorie, he has some experience kind of managing that firewall, right? Like leading a news operation that is owned by a publisher who has a rightward bent, that has a more conservative opinion page. That should give readers of the Post and its staff, I think, a little bit of solace that, you know, Matt Murray is someone he's a very good editor, very principled. He has a spine. If there's somebody who can kind of manage this situation, I like to think it's him.
It definitely does scare me, though, with the trends with the Post and also with the Los Angeles Times, where their billionaire owners are really trying to curb what their editorial departments are doing and totally dismantling any, you know, and I don't think that you can assume that if they just did an editorial, there isn't some effect on the other, you know, parts of the paper. I'm glad that there is a watchdog there and somebody who, you know, based on your experience, you anticipate will try to, you know, toe the line. But it's definitely scary when there's so many of these major, you know, at least these two top formerly, you know, well-respected institutions like the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post, for them to back away from, you know,
Let's talk about
and have have their folks in their editorial departments resign and protest out.
The LA Times and the Washington Post, we've talked about this a lot, obviously got in trouble with some part of the population when their editors, Bezos and the guy from the LA Times, vetoed editorials supporting Kamala Harris during the campaign. More recently, as we discussed, and we'll discuss obviously with Marty Baron next week too, Bezos in the last couple of days has said all of our editorials are going to be supportive. What are the two things?
Personal liberties and free markets.
And free markets. And he says, quote, opposition views will have to find another place to do this. You know, it's one thing for Marty Baron, who's a man of great integrity, to criticize him as he did in a very heavy kind of way, saying he's disgusted. Of all people, here is Megyn Kelly at the Semaphore National Summit yesterday with moderator Ben Smith mocking Bezos for, quote, bending his knee to Donald Trump. Here's Smith and Kelly.
Does it come across to you as ballsy or as weak?
I guess closer to weak, because he's doing what Joe and Mika did. He's bending the knee. It's the same thing as their trip to Mar-a-Lago. You know, Jeff Bezos, for years, up until about 2 minutes ago, was employing Jennifer Rubin at the Washington Post. He hasn't had a change of heart. Give me a break.
And so every time something like this happens, people call us or text us and say, what can we do if we're unhappy about this? Close to 300,000 people canceled their subscriptions after the Washington Post, after the Kamala Harris endorsement was killed. And apparently, according, I think, to NPR, 70,000 people. That was 12% of their subscribers, by the way. An additional 70,000 people have canceled their subscription in the last 48 hours after this change. That's a pretty sensitive topic for two people in the newspaper business. Is that an appropriate, Callum, starting with you, is that an appropriate response from a disgusted reader to just say, no mas for me, no more?
Well, I think people voting with their dollars there, and I think it's a good test for us to say, okay, so what do we? Because sometimes we get defensive about our own profession, right? You're upset that the AP is getting boxed out or whatever, and you just defend other. Do regular people care? And I think this is an indication that yes, they very much do. I mean, I was in Target recently, Jim. I was wearing an old Washington Post T-shirt with the "Democracy Dies in Darkness" slogan on there, right, that I still have from my time there. And some guy just walks up to me in the checkout lot, and he's like, "Loved that paper, but I was really disappointed about the Kamala Harris endorsement or not endorsement." And it was just sort of striking to say, oh, here's one random guy in Target, right? But people do care, and they're showing that with their dollars.
If people weren't happy with your editorials, the Bay State, I'm serious about this. Should they cancel their subscription?
I mean, they have a right to. I think that protest and, boycotting is one of the most powerful forms of protest in America. And it is really, when you're talking about addressing a billionaire and addressing the power of money, if you address people's, you change people's dollars and you reduce the amount that you spend, and that your organization or your group of people or your community spends in a particular business, there's been a lot of calls for boycotts lately.
Today, we're supposed to be boycotting. You shouldn't have been in Target, Callum.
Yeah. Target as well, because of the lack of the backing away from DEI and many of the things based on the misinformation that's out there. So, I think that it is very important that people boycott. I wrote a whole editorial about it, and I think that is what got us through. That's what moved the pendulum in the 60s and the 70s, and anti-apartheid with South Africa. It's a very, very powerful tool. So
but
I was
thinking about, we were talking about this earlier with our listeners about protesting. I don't want to get off topic, but you think of, okay, we're giving up going to Amazon for the day and Target for the day, or whatever it is for the day. And then you think of back at the Montgomery bus boycott where people walked. To shut down.
And that happens in many European countries.
Yeah.
I mean, what has happened in America is that folks don't protest physically like we used to. And I think that that's going to change. I think that this administration is really going to change that. I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of activism because these massive cuts, indiscriminate slashes, removal of whole, projector removals of whole different departments in the government, and the slow response to the legal fight against that and the legal cases that are being filed. I think, what's going on with the AP and the...
Yeah, what about that? Yeah, what about that?
For those who don't, the Associated Press, we talked about this a little bit last week, but there are updates here, and it relates to the boycott topic too, is Donald Trump decided to bar the Associated Press from the smaller press gatherings, the press pool, because they, in their style book, I think it was, said we're going to keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico. Trump, they did say, from what I understand, Trump is now calling it the Gulf of Mexico. He didn't like it, banned them from this. They went to court, and at least preliminarily, they have lost. The issue I want to raise with you that we raised last week gets back to boycott, Ron, that you mentioned a minute ago. We had Chuck Todd on last week, and Chuck was part of the effort when Obama barred Fox News from covering, what's the name of the compensation? Ken Feinberg. The other stations, CNN, CBS, ABC, and NBC, where Chuck worked then, said, we're not going to your press conferences. We're going to boycott. Obama folded and ultimately allowed. These people from these other outlets are writing a letter, signing a letter to Donald Trump as if that's going to move anything, rather than saying, we're going to do what our sisters and brothers did X number of years ago. If they can't go, we can't go. What's your take on this, Callum?
Well, I think what makes it such a tricky situation is that in the Obama era, I think that those news organizations had some confidence that if they sent that strong message, that they would get they would get a response from the White House. The White House would bend back. And I don't think that they can feel the same way now. And so I think this tricky thing, whether you use Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America or any number of other issues right now, I think news outlets are wrestling with, is this the hill I'm willing to die on, right? Or do I need to throw the president a bone on this thing where I'm playing a long game? Because remember, the North Star for all of us is serving our audience, right? And we can't hold a president accountable if we're not in the room. Right. So we need to maintain some measure of access. At what cost is a very legitimate question to have. But I think that's what people are wrestling
You
about.
subscribe to that line of thinking there, Ron Mitchell, or should they have just walked out?
I think that you have to be an activist, and I think that that's the only thing that's going to, create a different environment. I agree, though, that if you're not in the room and you can't, and you're not in the game anymore, that is a powerful tool. And I think that the court might have responded quicker as well if the other outlets backed it. I think that you're standing out on a limb by yourself. It's always a scary feeling. But you've got to have ethics, and you've got to, stand up for what's right.
We're talking to Ron Mitchell from the Bay State Banner and Callum Borchers from the Wall Street Journal.
So we've seen an awful lot of anchors disappearing lately. We had Joy Reid from MSNBC, which caused a big protest by Rachel Maddow, who's probably the star of nighttime MSNBC. Lester Holt, longtime newsman who did the nightly news and Dateline for NBC. I guess he's going to stay on to do Dateline. He's not going to do the nightly news anymore. Chuck Todd, we talk to him every week. He's gone from NBC. Jim Acosta was exiled to the midnight hour at CNN, so he quit. Is there anything to be Nora O'Donnell's? A lot of them.
Can we play Maddow sound, by the way?
Sure.
Because what's significant about those two cuts, Joy Reid and Alex Wagner, is Maddow makes a point. Joy Reid is a black journalist. Alex Wagner is Asian. Here's what Rachel Maddow had to say to her credit on air, on her show, on MSNBC.
I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them. That feels indefensible, and I do not defend it.
By the way, Zoe, our colleague, is telling me, I wasn't aware, Maddow also defended her producers on air as MSNBC was making all these producers reapply for whatever jobs were available. What do you think is going on, Callum Borchers?
Well, I think the last part of what Maddow said was really striking to me, where she says no matter who replaces them, right? Because it's three other people of color who are replacing Joy Reid's show, right? So I think what she's trying to signal to us there is, okay, this isn't a whitewashing in the pure sense, right? But there's something else going on here, and I'm curious what line she's walking up to there, right? I mean, this is a bold, as you said, Jim, for her to go on her own network on the air. I mean, she has some clout, right? She feels like she has enough security to do this. But what more is she not saying? That's what makes me curious about it, right? Because she's saying you can't just say, oh, okay, well, it's fine because other anchors of color are taking their place. There's something still that's grating her about this, and I'm curious what it is. Maybe we'll learn more in the coming days.
Well, Michael Steele, I think, is a very talented guy, too, and great to listen to. He's got
former chair of the Republican
Yes,
National
he's a Republican,
Committee.
and he's I think he's a very talented guy.
Yeah.
So,
and he's on with Simone Sanders, and
But I also think that this is evidence that NBC has bended the knee.
yeah.
Joy Reid and Alex Wagner were, straight ahead as unabashed, honest reflections on how they felt about Trump. And again, it's opinion. But I think that this is bending the knee. I think it was a message to the Trump administration to say, hey, we're going to tone down, we're going to soften our coverage of you. And it was a shock to me because I didn't expect it from MSNBC.
Remember,
and
this
was
comes
a big
on the
boycott
heels
as well.
of ABC. What is it, 10 million, 20 million?
15
because
for Stephanopoulos.
How much was it?
I think they settled for 15.
15 million because George Stephanopoulos called something rape that was actually sexual assault, which virtually every legal expert said ABC would not have lost. CBS, because of the 60 Minutes thing and the editing, and Kamala Harris is in discussions about possible settlement too.
I don't know if we mentioned this, but our staff just reminded us that after Maddow defended her producers having to reapply for their jobs, her staff was let go as part of the MSNBC
That's
overhaul.
pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Let's see what she does here. Before you guys go, you made a suggestion, Callan, to one of our colleagues, which I'm glad you did, about other sources to get media criticism. We decided to start this last week because our former colleague, Emily Rooney, had this fabulous show, Beat the Press, on Friday nights that had a lot of interest. And by the way, not just from media people, the public was interested too. That's why the hole we hope to fill to some small degree here on Fridays at 1 o'clock. But talk for a second about some other opportunities for people to get national perspective on where the media is going.
Well, I'm just so curious how you see some of these people, whether they're leaving CNN, it's Jim Acosta or Chris Cillizza or Oliver Darcy, right? They're striking out, and in some cases they're starting their own Substacks, their own email newsletters, much smaller niche audiences, right? But that pipeline of sort of direct to the reader, that personal level of trust that they're building, I think is an intriguing formula. I'm sort of curious about the sustainability of it, right? Some of them seem to be having very good luck in racking up subscribers and building some financial viability, and good for them. That's a pathway, though, for folks who've probably already built a big following and reputation in one of the mainstream platforms, right? So I have sort of mixed feelings, Jim, about how viable a path that is. If you're a journalism student, and I teach down the street at Northeastern, right? I have these young, bright, bushy-tailed journalism wannabes, and so I don't know if I can, in good conscience, tell them, hey, just go start a Substack and you'll be fine. But I'm curious.
It's liberating in some degrees. I don't want to misquote Chuck Todd yesterday, but didn't Chuck say to us in the middle of the discussion how freeing it was to be able to say whatever was on his mind? Obviously unfeathered
with
by what his responsibility was as a journalist at NBC. Gentlemen, it was great to have you both. That was terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. We have been speaking with Wall Street Journal columnist Callan Borges, who wrote the legendary column about Jim babysitting for Tupac Shakur back in the day.
You are so jealous. It is insane, by the way.
Well,
Marjorie just loves you. She just loves you.
Well,
yeah.
That's one person's opinion. Thank you, Ron.
Okay. And Ron Mitchell, of course, from the Bay State Banner, which is a wonderful local paper, which he is reviving over there.
Have revived, yes.
Have revived. Sorry.
It wasn't dead, though. I don't want to upset anybody.
It wasn't dead.
It was
you got the art going on. You got the online stuff going on. You got the TV
I think it's
thing
time
going
for you
on.
to say Tom Rush is a good singer, but he's no opera singer. You want to do that one, too?
Okay.
Okay, fine. Who'd you babysit, Marjorie?
Well, no one famous, Jim.
Okay,
there
you go. Let's leave it at that.
Somebody famous pet my dog when I was a little girl.
Who was that?
Jacqueline Kennedy.
That doesn't count at all. That's great.
That was it. We all touched the dog after that, see if she would rub off, on us. Jacqueline Kennedy. There you go.
Okay, that's good.
We've been speaking with the Wall Street Journal columnist Callan Borges and Ron Mitchell from the Bay State Banners. I just said, why am I saying it again? After a quick break, home appliance. Oh, not going to do this.
No, we're going to talk about
We were
Ukraine.
going to do home appliance week, but we are not.
We'll do that next week.
There was just an incredible interchange between the President of the United States and President Zelenskyy about a peace effort in Ukraine, and the language was angry and tense, and we're going to talk about that when we return. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, a federal investigation uncovered serious safety problems at the Boston Housing Authority. And on this week's Joy Beat, how one mom donated thousands of onesies to premature babies after her own emotional experience. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And The Lyric Stage, presenting Art. A controversial piece of art forces three best friends to examine just how well they really know each other. February 21st through March 16th at Lyric Stage Boston. Tickets at lyricstage.com. And McLean Middleton, a regional law firm with over 100 attorneys and locations in Woburn and Boston, serving clients for over 100 years in the areas of corporate law, tax law, litigation, and estate planning. McLean.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy live from the library and stream at youtube.com/GBH News. Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General, is here at the library next Wednesday at 1 o'clock for an hour of Ask the Attorney General. Friday of next week, we'll have both the former EPA administrator under Barack Obama, that's Gina McCarthy, and she was the environmental advisor, and then whatever, and for Biden too. And former Washington Post editor Marty Barron talking about firsthand what we just talked about a minute ago. As we said to you, we were going to end today's show. We tried to end Friday on an up note to continue our week of home appliances here, talk about bidets, but we were too embarrassed to do that after what happened in the Oval Office. So we're going to talk a little bit about Ukraine and what just happened in the Oval Office with Vance, Trump, and Zelenskyy there. Here's just a little piece of this tense back and forth from maybe 20 or 30 minutes ago between the three of them. The first voice you'll hear is the president's, the second, the presidents of Ukraine, and near the end, you'll hear J.D. Vance.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
I'm not
cards.
playing cards.
But right now, you don't.
You're
playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're gambling with the lives of
involved.
millions of people. You're
You
gambling with World War III.
What do you
You're
think
gambling
about?
with
What do you
World
think
War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's
with
back
all
to
respect to
you.
your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said
very
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
J.D. Vance has the nerve when tens of thousands of his people have died and they're being attacked by this murderous dictator and friend of Donald Trump's. Have you said thank you once?
According to the, NPR, Vance went on to say, offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country, please. He has thanked us over and over and over again. I don't think Donald Trump is trying to save his country, frankly. I think he's trying to make money off it through those minerals, and he's made concessions to Russia all over the place. And over Ukraine, he's given more, obviously, to Russia than to Ukraine.
We want to know how you feel about this exchange. And I know you don't know much more about it than we do because it happened while we were on the air and hopefully you were listening. Here's what Trump posted on his Truth Social via NPR. This is who told us about this shortly after the meeting. We had a very meaningful meeting in the White House today. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. It's amazing what comes out through emotion. I have determined that President Zelenskyy is not ready for peace if America is involved because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage. I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. So we want to know what you think about what little we all know about this handful of minutes in the Oval Office when President Zelenskyy came here. I don't even know if they ended up signing the rare minerals deal. What you thought of Zelenskyy had to say, Trump, Vance, and where are you on what our obligation is, if any, to the people of Ukraine? A poll from the Pew Research Center in early February asked people if they, when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the U.S. is providing what level of support? Republicans said 47% too much. Democrats only 14% too much. Not enough or about right was 62% of Democrats and only 30% of Republicans. So I want to know where you fall.
By the way, Trump has lied repeatedly about how much money we've spent over there.
You know who corrected him the other day?
Macron from
France.
Right
in front of the press,
and talked about loans versus grants. He's exaggerated, I think, by almost twice as much. And the European Union together has given a lot of money to them, too.
You see this? Trump and Zelenskyy canceled the press conference after this meeting at the White House. No surprise.
Let's play this a little before we take some calls at 877-301-8970. Let's replay this Trump reporter exchange after this meeting between him. I think this is after the meeting between him and Zelenskyy. Yes. Okay, here it is.
It's going to be a tough deal to make because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me.
I'll tell you.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So I guess the thing you have to do is you have to go in there and just fawn all over this guy. But in the case
as Macron did, Starmer felt they had to do.
Just to remember, Frontline did this unbelievable piece, won an Oscar for the documentary 20 Days in Mariupol, which if people haven't seen, they should go back and look.
Brilliant.
And they should go back and look what Russia did to Ukraine when they invaded Ukraine, even though the president says they didn't invade Ukraine. Russia's taken, I think it's up to 20,000 children from Ukrainian mothers and fathers and taken them back to Russia. So those little children don't even know their parents. I mean, is there any talk about whether Putin is going to send those children back? If there has been, I haven't heard anything about it. What concessions was Donald Trump going to get from Vladimir Putin? Have you heard of any?
No, and by the way, I assume you're aware, I know you're aware, that many of the children that were separated a bunch of years ago during Trump 1.0 at the southern border have not been reunited with their parents much closer to home. Britton from Roslindale text, that soundbite was pure filth. At least if we were talking about bidets, I'd feel cleaner. I'm with you. 877-301-8970. And by the way, if there are those of you out there who believe Donald Trump did exactly what he should do under the circumstances, you are welcome to call and voice that as well. This is not intended to be a one-sided conversation, but I think you know how Marjorie and I feel. Let's start with Dave in a car. You are first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
Two quick things.
Please.
So my thing is, I feel like I wish I was a grizzly bear and that I could just hibernate and wake up when the presidency is done, when Donald Trump is out of office. It's just like last term. You wake up every day and you wonder what's going to hit the fan. And the other thing is, the only way I could describe what's happening in the government right now is have you been on the Space Mountain ride at Disneyland or Disney World?
Nope.
No, but I know what it is. It's very
a roller
scary.
Coaster in the dark.
Yeah.
It's a roller coaster in the dark. And to quote one of my friends from high school, he went on that on magic mushrooms, and he was freaked out. He didn't know what was going on. It was like a wild ride. It was like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and he was freaked out. And when he got off, he sat on a park bench with his hands in his head, like ready to throw up. And that's the way I feel about this presidency right now. It's just unbelievable. I just can't even fathom day to day what's happening.
Dave in the car, thank you for voicing your opinion. We much appreciate you calling. 877-301-8970.
You know the other thing about Zelenskyy, remember right after Russia invaded, and a lot of people thought that...
Crimea or this time?
The second time.
Yeah.
Crimea was when Obama was the president.
Sure.
When they invaded the second time, and people thought that Zelenskyy would flee the country. And there was this picture of him and the people that, the men that are in, I don't know what they call it over there, their cabinet or his aides, whatever they call them, a picture of them saying, we're still here and we're not going anywhere. And the assumption that Russia was going to roll right over them in just a day or two. And that didn't happen. Obviously, they were having problems now, but we were all cheering him on and rooting for him, and we were all running around with our blue and yellow flags, and you'd see blue and yellow flags in people's homes. And what happened?
Do you remember early? Well, we had an election, and people of the United States voted for a person who was very open about the fact that he was not supportive of Ukraine's effort to remain free. You know what I remember from those early days? I'm so glad you brought this up. I've mentioned this before. One of the most beautiful stories that was done on CNN was they were talking about how average people, not people in the military, decided to participate in the struggle for freedom. I know you'll remember this. There was a retired doctor, a woman, who decided she wanted to get involved, and her contribution, she was making Molotov cocktails.
Yeah.
A retired doctor in her backyard, putting them on shelves, and average, ordinary people who were fighting, again, to protect themselves, their families, their country, were coming and getting them because they cared about democracy and about freedom. 877-301-8970.
Susan in North Kingston, thank you for calling.
Hello, Susan.
Hi there. Thanks for taking the call. I'm blown away by today's episode, and it's the first guy who called in who talked about the magic mushrooms, and it's just blowing his mind every day. That's exactly how I feel. I can't wait for Congress, hopefully, to take him out, because he is not representing anybody that I know in America. Even my Republican friends and family who may have voted for him, this behavior is not representing any of us.
And do you have, hey, Susan, don't leave. What odds would you say are that the Republican-led conference is going to take them on anything, including this?
They won't.
It's not going to happen for a while, and it might happen next year, maybe after new elections. And I think that we are just waiting for this whole thing to implode.
Susan, thanks for your call.
I just wanted
to
to fact check, as Trump keeps throwing around the number $300 billion and $350 billion. In fact, it was $174 billion, 4 installments in 2022, and then $60 billion more in 2024 in April. So that's about $174 billion. He doubles it. And lies about what Europe has contributed and how they contributed it.
Can I play a little sound here?
But he lies about everything. The New York Times front page story of the day about it's like
Peter Baker.
He just gets up there and lies about everything. And
then his policy is premised on the lie that he has just told. We talked with Ron and Callum a couple of minutes ago about how AP being thrown out of the press pool, and we didn't say that now the White House has taken it over from the White House Correspondents Association. They've added a lot of right-wing media. Here's one of them, Brian Glenn, who's this far-right reporter, and by the way, is Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, which is perfectly fine. Here he is at this press event with Zelenskyy and Trump. You have to listen carefully. In the middle of all this, listen to what this guy, who was just added to the press pool, asked Zelenskyy. This is Brian Glenn asking of President Zelenskyy.
Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if you do. You own a suit?
Yeah, have problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting.
I don't have
the
such.
office.
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
I will wear a costume after this war is finished. Brian Glenn just said a lot of Americans want to know why he doesn't wear a suit. Does any American here want to know why he doesn't wear a suit? Well, apparently not at the library today.
I believe he addressed that early on in the war when he talked about how he's part of a soldier in this war, and you've seen him at the front any number of times, and maybe that's a part of it. It's like when Brian Glenn, whatever his name is, asked that question in such a disrespectful way to a guy who's could have been killed over and over and over again, who's got a wife and kids. I mean, where do these people get off?
No, the answer is it's Trump tough guy talk.
Well, listen to this.
That's the kind of
listen
thing you
to this.
do.
This is something else that went on in this press conference. This is again from NPR. Okay, Trump says to Zelenskyy I've empowered you to be a tough guy, and I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States, and your people are very brave. So Trump is saying that he empowered Zelenskyy to be a tough guy. I don't think, we all know it was awful, obviously, that President Trump was shot in the ear, went by his ear, and that was terrible. I would never call President Trump a tough guy. He's a bully, is what he is. He's not a tough guy. He had 5 deferments. He had bone spurs over and over again so he could get out of going to Vietnam. He talks about people in our service, that gave their lives for their country, losers. He's a tough guy.
He prefers the ones who don't die, as he said.
Yeah. Okay.
Dari, I hope I got the name right. You're in a car. You're on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Thank you, and yes, you did, Jim.
Thanks, Dari.
I cannot recall ever feeling such pride in a president as I did just now, and if only Zelenskyy were the president of the United States.
Oh, you meant Zelenskyy. I thought you meant Zelenskyy. You're proud. Yeah. Why'd you feel that? What caused that pride in you, Dari?
Well, because he stared down Russia. He stared down Putin. He's gonna kowtow to this piece of dick. who, as Marjorie
Nicely
was
put.
just saying,
Lovely
draft
terminology.
draft the army, and everything Marjorie just said. I mean, this guy has more backbone than every member of the Republican Party put together.
Derry,
I
thanks.
applaud him, and if I'm going to leave this country, I'm going to Zelenskyy.
Derry, thanks for your thoughts. We appreciate yours as well.
Okay, here's someone on the other side. This is Adam from New Hampshire. I hate
Yep.
to say it. Anybody who has a brain knows Ukraine making concessions was always going to be the outcome unless you believe we should be sending troops in to fight a war for one of the most corrupt countries in the world. I guess he's calling Ukraine one of the most corrupt countries in the world. I would say that would be Russia. But in any case, here Adam again, which I actually do believe the left wants. It's funny to see how the left now being warmongers for endless wars, especially when one of the lines is, think about the jobs, think about it. Russia simply has more of a population to throw at the war. Ukraine was never going to win this without concessions unless they drag us in. I don't know that that's true. There was a lot of criticism of Biden and air cover and fighter jets and all that kind of stuff, that he should have done that. He said he wasn't going to do that to provoke some kind of really scary, like, nuclear response from Russia. But by the way that this war began, I'm not sure that that's necessarily true.
Well, this Adam,
because they were fighting for their own country.
Who on the left, Adam, feel free to text again or call, wants an endless war? What the left, and I would say it's not the left, it's people who actually care about other human beings and democracy. One is a murderous dictator to not benefit from his invasion of a sovereign country. That's not wanting the war to continue. We'd like it to never happen 3 years and 3 days ago. So with all due respect, I really don't know what you're talking about. But thank you. 877-301-8097.
Sue in Shrewsbury has a question, Jim. Why doesn't acting President Elon Musk wear a suit?
That's a great
That is the question.
That is very clever,
That's
Sue.
very good.
Thank you
and
very
our
much.
colleague Adam Riley reminded us that Trump describes Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 as genius and savvy.
Yeah. Okay. 877-301-8097. We're trying to get your reaction. I know it's on the fly to the meeting in the Oval Office about an hour, I guess, ago, give or take a few minutes, and what your position generally is on what the United States should be doing vis-a-vis Ukraine. Fred in the car. Hi.
Yeah, I think it's a little, well, I think, first of all, that Trump is a simple person.
Simple?
But
What do you mean?
In the same sense, I don't think he has this grand strategy.
Oh, okay.
I think that he hates Ukraine and Zelenskyy because if it hadn't been for Zelenskyy, Trump thinks that he would have won the last election.
That's correct.
In 20. But because of the impeachment and then the second impeachment, that's why he lost.
Well, there was the perfect.
He hates windmills because of Scotland. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
He hates windmills because of Scotland. It's simple.
What's Scotland do? I missed it.
It's a wind farm near his golf course.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what you're talking about, Fred, right?
He's a transactional kind of guy, Fred.
Yeah.
Thank you for the call. I think most people who have expertise in Fred's category, much more than Marjorie and me, think it was the so-called perfect phone call and his unwillingness, Zelenskyy's, people forget it's the same person, his unwillingness to do the Biden investigation that was being asked for by Donald Trump that led to all this problem. 877-301-8970. Zoe tells us, I didn't tell you guys this, but in the footage from C-SPAN, you can see Zelenskyy giving a thumbs up and a smile after that 5-minute berating from Trump and Vance. You know, you got to be as brave as we say Zelenskyy is. When you're sitting with the guy who is the most powerful person in the world and his vice president, to stand up like he did is really not simple. And I know he stood up in war and in front of weapons of destruction, but this guy is really one courageous, principled soul.
You know, Trump also lied and said only 4% of the people in Ukraine support Zelenskyy, and it's over 50. I think it's either 52 or 57%. I mean, and the other thing is, you know, people keep saying we get texts again, and the Trump people have said this, that it's Zelenskyy wanted to be in NATO that caused the war. I don't buy that for a second. I buy this idea that Vladimir Putin thought Russia was humiliated when the Soviet Union was divided. They lost their power. He's talked about this for 20 years, wanting to expand his power, recreate the Soviet Union, the glory days that were lost. Don't forget, he was a KGB guy all that time. And I think it very much annoyed Ukraine because they were a democracy moving along, and he didn't like the fact that they might be moving closer to the West. So that gives them an excuse. Remember, for days they lined up along the border.
I remember it very well.
And a lot of us thought, they're not going to do this. They're not going to invade a sovereign country. And then they did. And then, of course, a lot of the Russians don't really want to fight against fellow Russian-speaking Ukrainians that they may have known in their life, or they know their families and all that kind of stuff. It's weird.
So in 1 week, we have the Oval Office, I think, humiliation for the leaders of this country, and by in turn us. And this comes, the same week that we voted on a Ukrainian resolution with Iran, North Korea, and Russia. I mean, this is who we are, as that saying goes. Joyce in East Greenwich, you're next. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon.
You too.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, so I was just kind of responding to the insults towards Zelenskyy about how he was dressed and that he didn't have a suit on in his presentation.
Yep.
When you look at Elon Musk and what he wears with his muskrats, what they wear, okay, and then he brings his toddler into the office picking his nose. What kind of presentation is that? And secondly, why don't we address Donald Trump's orange makeup, cake stage makeup that he's been wearing with an orange face and a tie too long for years since he's been on the press? So that whole appearance thing was just because he doesn't have anything actual to say.
By the way, the reason we don't say that is because we knew you would, Joyce. We felt we'd leave it for you. And thank you for your call. We got to move along because we only have a couple of minutes left. Joyce, thanks very much for your call.
Oh, apparently I'm reading the New York Times. Is this the New York Times? Yeah, I think so now. They're talking about how after Vance kind of told that Zelenskyy he should be nicer to Donald Trump, and he criticized him. And then Zelenskyy turns to Vance and said, have you ever been to Ukraine?
We did say
once?
that?
Yeah,
I missed
that's
that.
pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Ron in North Attleboro, you have a minute. Hi, Ron.
Yes, Don here.
Don, sorry.
Anybody that doesn't think that Putin is holding a capital offense over Trump's head is very naive. He was in Russia in '87, and all the phones in those days were analog, and they were easily tapped. So he knows a lot about Trump that most people don't know. And that was the most outrageous meeting I've ever seen by a president of the United States in my life.
I would have to say, I think I'm with you. I haven't thought about it as much as you have, but I think I've not seen one like that either. Ron, thank you much for the call.
And don't forget how Trump called Zelenskyy a dictator, and when asked if he would call Vladimir Putin a dictator, who's executed many of his enemies, most notably just Alexei Navalny. Essentially, we think that he was done in prison, and other people that were his opponents, he wouldn't call him a dictator.
He said, I said that? I don't remember, or whatever it is. Did you see, Jared's joining us before the Culture Show, which will be live at the library in exactly 5 minutes. It's a great place to be at 2. Did you hear any of this presidential Oval Office thing?
Just as soon as I finished my prep for the show, I was looking at the accounts of it, but I haven't seen it or heard it yet.
Yeah. It's pretty bad. I'm sure you'll watch it at 3 o'clock. It's an embarrassment, I think, to all of us. And I hope a lot of people who support Trump, even if they continue, which obviously is your right, step back for a second and ask yourself if this is what you want our country to be doing, with people fighting for their lives and for their democracy. And I would like to think the vast majority of people in this country don't.
I can share that I was with Admiral James Stavridis the other day for a speaker series, and we asked him about this, and he said if it all came together, we should have known what it is to hope and expect that this was going to unfold, that this would have been a great deal for everyone involved. And he was pointing out that long term, once Ukraine started to invest in its mineral rights, even with the collaboration, the agreement with the U.S. in terms of revenue sharing, that this would have been a great deal for Ukraine in the end in terms of rebuilding.
Ukraine, by the way, started. Zelenskyy is the one who initiated the first discussion about minerals, but just obviously Trump took it to another level. What are you doing at 2 o'clock, Jared?
So it's kind of hard to believe, but a lot of people looked at Firefest, that big music festival a few years ago that a couple of documentaries were written about, because it went into an epic failure. People lost money, they were stranded on an island, and now it's back.
It's back.
After serving time in jail, its leaders bringing this back, so people are signing on for that, it seems. We're also going to remember Roberta Flack and Gene Hackman, two huge losses, of course, in the entertainment world. And then we'll look at this new future of James Bond now that Amazon has total creative control, and what does that mean for the franchise?
I knew nothing about Gene Hackman except his acting, which was brilliant. The fact that he was a normal person and didn't hang out in Hollywood. He had good relationships with all these people, Clint Eastwood and everybody, but was like a normal human being who just loved living as opposed to loved being a celebrity. Was actually pretty great.
And you're making me realize everybody has described him in their obituaries and their appreciations as the everyman, and that probably has everything to do with it. The fact that he didn't make himself, it seemed very intentional, he didn't make himself be Hollywood and lob onto that stardom.
We'll be listening 2 o'clock live here at the Boston Public Library. Thank you, Jared Bowen.
Thank you, Jared Bowen, and thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio, and thank you to people that came down to the Boston Public Library. We really appreciate it. Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page, Boston Public Radio. Tune in Monday. We'll talk with former Boston Globe editor Brian McGrory, our food policy analyst Corby Kummer, JVS Boston's Kira Kizaski, on workforce development for migrants here, and the Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett G. Price III. They're, of course, here for another edition of All Revved Up on BPR. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Tamsin Vital. Our engineer is John LaClaw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Glover, Patrick Lally, Brad Lewis, and Juan Jose Cadena. Thanks to our hosts at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. The Culture Show is going to start right after us. It's their week in review, and they're broadcasting live.
What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Porter Square, offering teen and adult recreational cooking and baking workshops, series, and cooking couples classes for culinary enthusiasts. CambridgeCulinary.com. Brainiacs, assemble! It's time for another year of High School Quiz Show. So put your thinking caps on and get ready to play along at home. Don't miss a new episode of High School Quiz Show Saturday evening at 6 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, coming up today on our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Where there's smoke, there's Fire Festival. Convicted swindler Billy McCall, the man behind the fraudulent luxury music festival, is back. He's announced Fire Festival 2, with tickets ranging from $1,400 to $1 million. What could possibly go wrong?
Fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
And is pop culture pushing the boundaries of blasphemy? Cynthia Erivo has landed the title role in Jesus Christ Superstar, and the backlash begins, with the religious faithful demanding a man play the role. What would Jesus do?
Try not to get worried, try
And we remember soul and R&B icon Roberta Flack, who died this week at age 88.
And there he was, this young boy, a stranger to my eyes, strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words, killing me softly with his song, killing me softly with his song.
Plus, another huge loss in the entertainment world, Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman has died. He did it all, playing a Klansman, a spy, a war hero, a president, and a basketball coach. He explored the dark side of human nature, but also could land the greatest laughs.
Wait! Where are you going? I was going to make espresso.
Also, his name is Bezos. Jeff Bezos. Now that Amazon has creative control of the James Bond franchise, what will the fate of 007 be?
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
And his name is Beard, James Beard. Sullivan's Castle Island, a South Boston landmark known for its hot dogs, fries, and lobster rolls, just won the esteemed James Beard American Classics Award.
Oh my God, you look like the 4th of July. It makes me want a hot dog real bad.
That and more all right now on our Arts and Culture Week in Review.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Welcome to The Culture Show, live from the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen.
I'm Callie Crossley.
And I'm Bennett, James Bennett II.
We're going over the week's top arts and culture headlines, starting with the Fire Festival. In 2017, the festival made headlines after musical acts pulled out. Attendees were left stranded without cash, and the definition of luxury lodging and gourmet food turned out to be cheese sandwiches and tents. Now the festival is back, with tickets costing between $1,400 and $1.1 million. Will people get burned again? This is just outrageous, isn't it? I mean, I'm beside myself in terms of being able to comprehend how this figure who led this effort, Billy McFarland, who went to prison for this, ultimately served 4 years, still owes about $26 million for this festival. If people don't know, there are two dueling documentaries about this that explain how people spent all of this money to go see acts on this island, thinking they were getting luxury accommodations, only to find out when they got there without money, because they told it would be a cashless venue, that there were no acts, that there were, as we mentioned, there were tents and cheese sandwiches. A lot of them couldn't get out right away. They claimed to have been abducted because they had no way to get out of there. Their things were just dumped out of a shipping container, their luggage and so forth, and told to gather it. And now some people apparently are going to sign up for this again.
I am gobsmacked. I just can't believe it. If you've watched even a second of those two documentaries, first of all, you are so taken with the fact that this guy is some kind of Machiavellian scam artist of the highest order, because I'm screaming at the screen going, are you kidding? And people bought it. And we should say these are very expensive tickets. Mm-hmm. This is not like $50 or even $500. This is a lot of money to attend this thing. And so the fact that people are considering it, and by the way, it's supposed to be in Mexico this time around, I just have nothing to say. I guess what he says in his little brochure is this is for the adventure seekers who rush the vision and take the leap that will help make history. What history? To watch you go back to jail again? I don't know. The tickets are going for $1,400 up to $1.1 million.
So again, for what people are paying for, before we get to you, James, for people watching here at the library or streaming on YouTube, here are a couple of images from the last Fire Festival. And here's what some of the vloggers and attendees on the ground had to say about the first iteration back in 2017.
After having the flight delayed 3 hours, screeching hot plane, finally landed, then got on a hot magic school bus. It took another 30 minutes to get here. There's like 50 tents that are ready and all the rest aren't. No one can get their bags. We've been here for hours. It's about to be pitch black out here. People are panicking. People are panicking, like tripping out.
It became this looting mentality. People were just walking with mattresses on top of their head.
We didn't want neighbors. There was absolutely zero organization.
They brought out the luggage in 2 big containers, like truck containers, like 18-wheeler containers. They just said, everyone grab your bag. And it was just a frenzy. Basically the exact opposite of everything we were promised.
We had no electricity, there was no showers, there was no bathrooms, there was no running water. They need to be held responsible because they basically abducted us.
Okay, I know memory is short, but here's what Fry Festival founder Billy McFarland said talking about this on NBC this week.
So we're going to have artists across electronic, hip-hop, pop, and rock. However, it's not just music. We might have a professional skateboarder do a demonstration. You might have an MMA champion teach you techniques.
You say we might have. Are any of these for sure haves? Are they booked?
So I think what makes Fire so cool is that we are selling the experience of Fire. I want to be one of the first festivals that can sell out with no artists.
But you do have them booked.
We're announcing the artists over the next few months, so I'm not in charge of booking the talent.
I think, James, we can decode that, right?
Oh, yeah. He's selling the experience of Fire. Our modern Prometheus is amongst us. But here's the thing, right? This initially happened back in 2017. I think the initial announcement was December 2016. And if you recall, the promo behind this were these gorgeous sizzle reels of, Exuma partying on Pablo Escobar's private island with the wild, pigs, Jenners and Kardashians, Emily Ratajkowski, all these models and internet personalities were really pushing this experience. But that was 8-9 years ago. The people that he was courting then are now probably in their mid-30s, early 40s. They know, and they're going to stay away. But the people that he's courting, again, maybe, early 20s to early 30s, they were 11, 12, 18, 19, still in college. And so they don't know. But in those intervening years, there were those 2 documentaries that did make him this weird pseudo scam celebrity. And he actually, I think it might have been in that same interview, but he was talking about how Fire's the experience, and so you'll be scuba diving with me. You'll be bouncing around to other islands and other countries on small planes. And it's he's also selling that experience of hanging out with Billy McFarland, which causes you to think who and is waking up and saying, who I want to party with today? That guy.
I want to be put in a room with this man because I want to understand how it is that he gets people to part with so much money, how he can sell a festival, whereas he just basically said on NBC he doesn't have any of the acts booked. Also, somebody thought to actually confirm with the new venue, and they have basically said no permits have been issued. Mm-hmm. So this has all the trappings of what happened the first time.
But you know what else is weird about this, too, I was thinking about? Again, thinking back to 2017, there was the promise of exclusivity, right? There's the appeal of vanity, and, resident millennial here, I suppose millennials are extremely vain. That generation that wants to be seen, they want to party, they want to drink, they want to debauch, they're putting all that out in real time on Instagram. However, if you read anything about, the Gen Z social crisis, they don't do any of those things. So I do wonder what happens when you have a 19, 20-year-old who doesn't party and socialize in that way in a place exclusively for that purpose.
There you go. And who are sober curious, by the way. So where's all that drinking going to be happening? I mean, it's I don't get it. I just don't get it.
And as we said, he still owes $26 million, and some of that money is supposed to go to the other people. We tried to get some sense of how tickets are selling because he did promise that it was going to sell out within the first 24 hours. We couldn't really figure that out, but I think we were able to check that we could still purchase tickets. Not that we did, because we have no intention. We'll just watch the documentary in 3 years instead.
What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. What's the buzz? Tell me what's
Wondering what the buzz is? Well, here's the buzz. What is Jesus Christ Superstar without a superstar? Cynthia Erivo has been cast in the title role for an upcoming concert production at the Hollywood Bowl, but religious faithful are blasting the decision as an act of blasphemy. Of course, this was huge casting news for the Los Angeles Philharmonic to announce that they had booked Cynthia Erivo into this concert production at the Hollywood Bowl. It will be a major summer event. And then we have the backlash. And I wonder, do all of the religious faithful think that the biblical story of Jesus unfolded in a rock opera to begin with? I mean, so there is this huge concern about the fact that you have a black queer woman playing Jesus Christ when a lot of questions have been posed over the last however many millennia about what Jesus Christ posed, what he looked like, where he came from, and what he espoused. And so the big question is, why wouldn't anybody who wanted to assume that role and channel Jesus Christ, again, in this fictionalized account by Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber of the biblical story.
So I think that some part of the pushback are people who have never seen the musical. So they had no idea that the whole thing is irreverent to begin with. So we're not dealing with a faithful recitation of the Bible as you might know it if you're keeping close to a read of that document. This was an irreverent piece by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, and the lyrics say just that. And so from the beginning in 1971, when it first, came out on, or they first presented it, they got pushed back and called blasphemous because people didn't like that. It didn't matter who was playing the roles. They just didn't like the fact that you were taking, they thought, very serious, religious. And they said, we're not using the word religious. We're doing something else here. So this is what the piece is, Jesus Christ Superstar, has always been about. And, I think a good third of the people protesting don't know that. The other 2/3 have some issues with Cynthia Erivo, period. And then the last third is just like, what are you doing? It feels like we're returning to 1950s sentiment, and this doesn't fit right now.
Right. It's kind of a non-story in a way, because it was blasphemous then to some, and it's blasphemous now. Now, personally, I was into the announcement of Cynthia Erivo because I remember when I first saw Jesus Christ Superstar, the film adaptation. I was in 3rd grade. My first thought was, why Judas got to be black? But let's someone up to Carl Anderson, R.I.P.
Yeah,
but
right.
You were saying though, like this tension of approaching this musical with a theological kind of like mind, or approaching it looking for that kind of framework when that just simply doesn't exist. Because you alluded to people being upset that maybe it's a black queer woman that is portraying Jesus Christ, but at the same time, what people are upset about, or were upset about, was Judas is the sympathetic character. They're not really alluding at all to the resurrection. Jesus is a kind of a tense dude. Jesus and Mary Magdalene, maybe being a little bit intimate. And if that's the case, it's not a musical for you anyway. If those are the things that generally concern you. I don't know, go watch Passion of the Christ or something. I don't recommend that, by the way. I've seen it too many times.
Well, I think there's value in this, and that we have the discussion. We often have this discussion about casting. Who can play what? Who brings what life experience to what? But this seems to be something universal, but I think this is also something that they can ride right to ticket sales.
Oh, yeah.
Cynthia Erivo, of course, as we'll find out at the Oscars this weekend, is one of the hottest talents on the planet right now. She's going to be right here at Boston Pops, opening the pop season here. She has an extraordinary voice, nominated for Oscars, Tonys. I think she's so close to being an EGOT winner.
Yes.
It could change this weekend when we see if she wins Best Actress for her role in Wicked. But I think you're right, Kelly, that there doesn't seem to be an understanding of the piece itself to understand how this is telling this story, and in a way that for so many audiences became really fresh and really galvanizing when this musical premiered decades ago.
Exactly. It only focuses on the last year of Christ's life, as they present it in this. And here's just some of the lyrics so people who don't know what we're talking about here. Tell me what you think about your friends at the top. This is addressed to Jesus. Now, who do you think besides yourself was the pick of the crop? Buddha. Where was he? Where is it at? Is he where you are? Could Muhammad move a mountain, or is it just PR? I mean, that's the sentiment of the piece. It's it's not Genesis.
And kind of thinking about those that are critical today, not really familiar. What came to mind when I was thinking about this story was the New York Times ran this piece this week about how what appeared to be the decline of Christianity in America has come to a halt, in part because of young people, particularly young men, identifying as Christian in a way. And I guess if they're kind of new to that world, new to that faith, new to those traditions, then they, you might be primed, right, to see things as upsetting, to see things, as blasphemous, without really engaging with it below that surface. Because, like you just read those lyrics, it's pretty obvious, what it is and who it's for.
Right.
Well, and Tim Rice has stepped forward to say he absolutely endorses this idea. So, of course, there's no talk at the moment, and it's 0% chance that this will be canceled, but it will move forward. And again, if you want to book your tickets, it's happening out at the Hollywood Bowl, August 1st through the 3rd in LA. Well, you're listening to our Arts and Culture Week in Review live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. Coming up, the lives and legacies of both Roberta Flack and Gene Hackman. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, a federal investigation uncovered serious safety problems at the Boston Housing Authority. And on this week's Joy Beat, how one mom donated thousands of onesies to premature babies after her own emotional experience. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And GM Roth Design Remodeling. Dreams delivered. With custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates. Elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Celebrity Series, presenting Kodo live at Symphony Hall on March 9th with a thunderous performance celebrating the centuries-old Japanese tradition of taiko drumming. Tickets at celebrityseries.org.
Massachusetts was at the heart of the American Revolution and the gambling revolution.
The Massachusetts lottery was very innovative.
I'm Ian Koss. Listen to Scratch and Win wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Callie Crossley and James Bennett II. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes remembering Roberta Flack. The legendary Grammy-winning singer died Monday at age 88. We're listening to her 1982 song, Making Love. Not Feel Like Making Love, Making Love, but Making Love, which is significant because as we look back at her career, what really struck out to me is that this song is all about the gay community. And this is a huge part of Roberta Flack's career, is that when she left being a school teacher in Washington, D.C., and she decided to move forward with her music career, one place that she played often in D.C. and one place that she would visit often throughout her life was Mr. Henry's, which was a gay bar there. And it was racially diverse, of course, welcomed gays in the 1960s and 70s, and she did not back down from supporting this community and singing this song. She had another song, Ballad of the Sad Young Men, on her first album, and she would remain a champion for gay people in the LGBTQ community throughout her career.
Wow, that's some information. I knew about Mr. Henry's, but I don't think I knew the full context of that scene for her. I just was very familiar with her lush vocals, and I just can't tell you how many great dates I had tied to these songs. That's what came back to me, was those good dates. The first time ever I saw Your Face, Killing Me Softly, she won the Grammy Record of the Year back-to-back. She was the first person to do that. Then later Billie Eilish and U2 did the same thing. I mean, there's not a song that I can think of that she did that it just wasn't just so beautifully sung. And it hurts me to know that she died of ALS, which constricts your muscles so that she couldn't sing, though she continued to be involved and engaged with music, and actually wrote her autobiographical children's book in 2023 about the green piano that her dad got for her, which inspired her initial ascent into music and artistry.
Yeah, and grateful, ascent it is, because her voice, right, it's so clear. is what always strikes me when I listen to her music. But her voice is also so omnipresent, culturally. At least for me, it's like I know what, my parents and my parents' friends liked and, would often listen to. But she's one of those, I guess, that crop of artists whose art gets transmuted into these new sounds and textures, which enhances the experience when you go back to listen to how, she sang those songs first on wax, how she maybe covered other songs, how other artists came after her and took inspiration from that. Obviously, I'm thinking about, the Fugees with, Killing Me Softly, or, Be Real Black for Me with Donny Hathaway, as the basis for a sample for Scarface's My Block. So there's that generational transcendence that she lends herself to. And, it's just kind of cool thinking about her being in this world of hip-hop lore as well.
One of the things that strikes me about her music, too, is the way she sang her songs. Leaving her voice aside, that there was a period of time when so many songs like Send in the Clowns were lifted out of musicals and they worked because they told an entire story. She's sort of the inverse, in that she put the entire story into a song. You couldn't help but falling into a whole world, a whole scenario, a whole romance with figures for the way that she sang these songs. I lost a lot of hours this morning when I went down the rabbit hole to watch, and there are so many beautiful videos of her performances from the early days, just her at the piano. She was a classical pianist. I mean, she was a virtuoso aside from her voice and what she could do at the piano, but there are so many great videos of her just singing, and just that she is so present, and the power that she brings to those songs is extraordinary.
And I want to mention the quiet, because a lot of people put her in the category of artists who were in the quiet storm. Those songs that kind of just wrapped around you, were a little, just had the candles going, and you were, as you said, sucked into it. But it was just, it was the quietness of it and the power of the quiet. I saw a guy on, I think it was TikTok today, just giving her a shout out, and he said, look how she can control being in the lowest register. I mean, that is really hard to do.
Yeah. I want to come back to something you said, Jared, about how she brought herself to, these pieces of music as well. And, first time ever I saw your face, right? Very notable for how she transformed that into this very kind of, sensual, melty ballad. And she won Record of the Year in 1973 for that, and became the first artist to win back-to-back in 74 when she won again for Killing Me Softly. And the thing is, right, every year, we kind of have the discussion on the Grammys of the difference between Record of the Year and Song of the Year. And you say, well, Song of the Year is for the songwriters, what you're putting, to paper, what you're bringing into the studio. But record is what comes out of the studio. And so it does mean a lot that she, as much for her voice and for her playing, is known for that ability to, again, make that transformation, to put her stamp on something in a wholly unique way that doesn't sound like a facsimile of what came before her.
And also, she was studying, a little local connection, which we always love to mention, because she had started out in education as a teacher before she had the brilliance and the conviction to pursue the music career. She was in education for quite some time. And for a while, she was here at UMass Amherst. Or actually, I don't know if it was Amherst, but I know it was in the UMass system to get to pursue her doctorate in education. So she was a woman who was just also insatiably curious throughout her lifetime, and I think you could tell that. And she also never seemed to fall for the trappings of Hollywood in the industry, again, to remain very present. Well, another huge loss and incredible legacy to remember this week, Gene Hackman, the versatile actor who won 2 Oscars, who played villains in Champions, who landed laughs superbly, and who captivated audiences with his masterful variations of the everyman. He died this week at age 95. Here's a taste of Gene Hackman's expansive career in Hollywood.
We're going to have ourselves a time, boy!
All right, Popeye's here. Get your hands on your heads. Get off the bar and get on the wall. What's my name?
Popeye Doyle.
You smile when the bulldozer ran over the black kid's body. Get here! Get here!
If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
I was in the Blue Bottle Saloon in Wichita the night that English Bob killed Corky Corcoran. I didn't see you there.
I think homosexuality...
Lots more ice for you.
Lots more ice, Dad. One of the things that's weakening this country.
Really? That's what I thought until I found out Alexander the Great was a talk about gays in the military.
How about those dolphins, huh?
Where are you going? I was going to make espresso.
That, of course, was from The Birdcage. You kind of forget that he was a great comedian, too, from Young Frankenstein to The Birdcage. But I was thinking this morning about, everybody uses, I think it's overused, actually, the description, he was the everyman. But in this case, I think there's a better way to talk about it, and that is that he was somebody that you could relate to in his intonation, the squint, the pauses, the breaths. He just seemed so regular, which made him also an extraordinary actor because he was living the part. He came up with Dustin Hoffman and Robert Duvall and those people who, again, like Roberta Flack, weren't necessarily after the stardom, but they were after the craft. And that really showed, I think, obviously, with Gene Hackman's long and very storied career.
And what everybody said about him, which we can see on the screen, is that he fully immersed himself in each of the parts. So my favorites, Crimson Tide, boy, that was a tense movie. And then Birdcage is the other appearance. They couldn't be more different. But in each of those roles, he is just fully in it so that I am suspended, from reality, which is the whole point.
Yeah, and again, similar to Flack, we were just talking about, there is this kind of omnipresence, with his, appearances on screen, right? Like, I just feel if you ever grew up watching movies in some capacity, you've run up on Gene even before you knew who Gene Hackman was. There's the obvious movies like, The French Connection and The Conversation, Royal Tenenbaums, which is one of his last roles. But I remember my dad would always have The Quick and the Dead on, which freaked me out when Leonardo DiCaprio gets shot. It scared me. But I don't know how old I was, but eventually it was kind of oh, that's the same guy, from Hoosiers. That's the dude from Poseidon's Adventure, right? And, coming back to the conversation just very briefly, I remember when I saw that, and what really struck me was how unshiny Gene Hackman was in that as this kind of troubled and conflicted expert, wiretapper, PI kind of guy, kind of let the role do the speaking and not himself, if that makes any sense. It's just a very regular dude on screen. Really like that.
But so conscious of his decisions. I was struck by something I read in one of the remembrances this week, which was that his father left when he was 13 years old. And apparently Gene Hackman was, as a 13-year-old, just playing in front of the house, and his father drove by and just waved at him. And he said that stayed with him for his entire life. You know what that gesture is. I mean, how cinematic is that? Your father driving away, knowing in retrospect that he would be gone for the rest of your life, and just gives you a wave. And that, I think, allows you to understand some of the choices he made, going all the way to The Birdcage, which, frankly, I had almost kind of forgotten that he was in, because he was so almost subtle about that, because he played this conservative senator who found himself amid Nathan Lane and Robin Williams, this super gay couple in Miami, Florida. And rather than be this blustery, angry, over-the-top, stereotypical senator, he played him as this confused, what situation am I in? How do I get in here, and how am I getting out of it? And it was such a great choice, because what do you do when you're up against Nathan Lane and Robin Williams, who actually was a little bit more measured in that too, but in an explosive way. I think when Robin Williams was measured, that was notable too. But to make those choices and come off that way is pretty brilliant.
Yeah. Pretty brilliant, I have to say. And I'm so sorry that we do not know actually the circumstances around his death. Is quite unexpected. I hope that we, at least get that information soon. But it's a great loss, and the variety of people that he's touched in his career who've come forward to say how much they'll miss him and how much they admire his work is also telling.
James, you were mentioning to me just as we were coming on the air, did you meet him or something at some point?
No, I did not meet him in person, but I met him unexpectedly on screen because, when I was a kid, I liked to go to the movies, and my mom was a flight attendant, so she was away on the weekends flying, so I was hanging out with my dad, who would let me kind of see whatever I wanted. And my mom got wind of the fact that I was watching PG-13 movies when I was decidedly not 13. And so X-Men comes out, and my friend's dad is like, we're going to go pick up James and go see X-Men. My dad says, no, he cannot do that. He's too young. That sets me up for teasing. He sees me devastated, and he says, you know what? You want to see a grown-up movie that your friends haven't seen yet? And we go to the Blockbuster, and he rents Mississippi Burning.
Oh, my
God. And sits me on the couch.
Oh, my God. God.
I wanted superheroes, but I instead got Gene Hackman doing a knock-up job as that FBI agent in pursuit of the Klansmen who murdered those 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi.
Whoa.
So, yeah, thanks, Gene, for that memory.
So it's funny, I have a personal one, too. My father had to get used to the fact that my mother had a lifelong crush on Gene Hackman. Has a lifelong crush on Gene Hackman. So, yeah, sorry, Dad. But sometimes you just can't compare.
Guess not. Oh, boy.
Well, also gone this week, actress Michelle Trachtenberg of Gossip Girl and Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame. She was 39 but had a long career, making her television debut at age 3 in a laundry detergent commercial, and then starring in a series by the age of 9 in Nickelodeon's The Adventures of Pete and Pete, which is when somebody starts so young and stays in their career for so long. She had a longer career than most people. We don't know the circumstances of her death, but from what I was reading, she always seemed to be very present and talked about avoiding drugs and alcohol and the trappings of fame. There is that whole cliche, which happens to bear out and often be true, about being a child star and what happens. But she remained very present in a time when the industry wasn't always kind to her either.
No, but she had some great roles. I mean, I have just stumbled across the Harriet Spy with Rosie O'Donnell, and she was such a little girl. And I don't think I put it together that was who she was. But of course, I knew her from the Gossip Girls and the Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Neither series particularly excited me, but I knew that she was a part of it. And, that was a big cultural moment, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So you could not be aware of who the young women were who were acting in it and what the story was and all of that. And she did a great job.
Yeah, there always seemed... Oh, sorry, I didn't cut you off. There always just seemed to be this fondness for her in the cultural milieu, I guess, of that millennial generation. And it's like, I guess she technically was a child star, but child star kind of implies that one has been forgotten, one has given up, one has fallen, quote unquote, if you want to call it, victim to, the trappings of fame and temptation and all that. But what's cool about Michelle Trachtenberg's career, right, is like, she was phasily with us for her life as a kid on Pete and Pete, transitioning out of Nickelodeon, into a movie like Harriet the Spy, and then onto UPN and the WB with Buffy, and then finally, to Gossip Girl, right? And so, she has this kind of, she got this fondness, I guess, that had always looked at her. And Harriet the Spy, right? It is this weird kind of touchstone. It's like peak nostalgia for so many people in a way that, when you really appreciate something, you shouldn't take it for granted. And I just want to also say, Kenan Thompson had a nice tribute to her on his Instagram. They were co-stars, at Nickelodeon. Yeah. Just with the simple message of just checking on your people. You don't know how they're doing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true.
She was always very present. And as sad as it is to talk about people we've lost this week, we have a whole segment about it. There's also kind of a joy in being able to go back, as I did this morning with Roberta Flack, and look at these great performances and live with them in the coming weeks or this weekend, and to go back and see the films of Michelle Trachtenberg and definitely Gene Hackman. So it's great that they have these legendary careers that can make them so remembered as well. Well, coming up, how the Seagulls of South Boston have been on to something, like dive bombing what's turned out to be James Beard award-winning cuisine. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
When you pour yourself a drink, you're probably using a glass that was cut by a machine. But in Spain, one man still cuts glasses by hand and makes top dollar while he's doing it. We meet the man making drinkware the old-fashioned way, artisanal glass, and the latest headlines. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Comcast, offering Xfinity Mobile, featuring data options that include streaming, browsing, and texting. More information is available at xfinity.com/mobile. And Babson College. You can learn to lead with impact and become a driving force for change. Babson's graduate virtual open house is on March 20th. Registration at babson.edu/gradopenhouse. And Emerson Colonial Theater, with a Broadway production of Jason Robert Brown and Alfred Urie's musical Parade, coming to Boston for 2 weeks, this March 11th through March 23rd. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com.
Local news, trusted coverage. Always on the GBH News YouTube channel. Subscribe today and watch on any device. Just search for GBH News on YouTube. GBH News, what matters to you.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Callie Crossley and James Bennett II. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes Sullivan's Castle Island. The landmark summer shack in South Boston has won a James Beard America's Classics Award. So this is perfect timing because it opens tomorrow for the season. People go there for the hamburgers, the hot dogs, the cut fries. And this is a moment that is so special for them because next year they'll celebrate their 75th anniversary season. To get this prize by the James Beard Foundation, you can't be nominated, you can't submit yourself. As they describe it, the foundation does, they look for restaurants that have the timeless appeal, that serve quality food, and are beloved by their communities, and that is certainly the case for Sullivan's at Castle Island. I have to say, I'm a big runner. I run the Harbor Walk often on Saturdays. I'm there almost every Saturday. It's painful because I can smell all the good food. I am
fried food.
Good fried food, exactly. I'm very entertained by the seagulls dive bombing. It gives me a lot of entertainment during that whole stretch around the island. What a special place that is.
One of the things I like about this America's Classics Awards from the James Beard Foundation is it recognizes more than the food. So, of course, the food has interest to the patrons, and that draws attention by an organization like the James Beard. But inherent in the title and the honor is the fact that the establishment has to be part of that community, have to have that neighborhood legacy. And so Sullivan's Castle Island has that, and they're perfect for it. I also note that the fact that they can't apply reminds me a little bit of the MacArthur Genius Award. You can't apply for that either.
Right.
They find you. They find you, which is great. And I'll note that in the other in the short list of others who are named in the class with them for America's Classics is also Dookie Chase in New Orleans, which is another very, very special place. And so, it really is just the essence of community and neighborhood and fun food and history.
Yeah, and the thing too is it's a testament to neighborhood support. Like you were saying, it's not just about the food; it's about what it means to the community. But the community also can sustain the restaurant. What I find really interesting about looking at the list of America's Classics winners over the years, I think the first year it was awarded was in 1999. These are old restaurants. I think the oldest one was a seafood joint in San Francisco, opened in 1849, still open, right? And what that means is that these are places that the people themselves want to see, continue to, thrive and be prosperous. Of those restaurants that won, really only a handful have been defunct now. And that's just a really cool thing to think about, how these restaurants can be, set up as institutions in a way that do provide that transmission of experience, that you've had it, the next generation has had it. You can think back to the generations before you that have had a similar experience in those walls. It's a really cool award, I think.
Yeah, let me paint a little picture for Sullivan's because, as I say, I see the scene play out every weekend, and I love scenes that you could put sort of any sort of filter on it. Let's put a sepia filter on it. Suddenly, this could be from the 1930s. Maybe take away the cars if you're showing the parking lot or the clothing. This could be from the 1890s. Okay, it's 75 years old. It doesn't go back that far. But it has such a great timeless quality to it, and you see people enjoying it. And also, it's a little bit of an effort to get there because you have to either drive there or bike there or take the T. The nearest T station isn't that close. To drive, you might not get a parking space. This time of year, you definitely can. Maybe not tomorrow as people flock there, especially with this award. And yet people do. People find a way to get there. There is not one time that I'm running by there any time of the year, any temperature of the year, when there aren't people just enjoying, and seagulls enjoying the food from Sullivan's. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to behold. By the way, I couldn't remember the name. It's the crinkle cut fries. I knew it had a special name. I forget what I called the cut fries.
With the K.
Crinkle cut fries. So congratulations to them. We're very happy for them.
Big congratulations.
Well, now from James Beard, it's James Bond. News that Amazon has taken over creative and artistic control of the 007 franchise has fans and former James Bond actors shaken and stirred. I have to say, so basically the backstory to this is that there has been the Broccoli family, which has been presiding over all of the films for the entire span of the adaptations from the Ian Fleming novels. And this passed down to the children, notably Barbara Broccoli, who has, apparently she is just an iron maiden. You do not mess with her. She has never let Hollywood push her over in terms of how these portrayals would happen, who would play James Bond, how these movies would be executed. So there is a very distinctive genetic line among all the James Bond films until now. And for some reason, for a reported $1 billion deal after some 8-point-something billion dollar deal a few years ago, she and her brother have turned over everything to Amazon. And I think this is going to be the worst decision. I know that everybody has to move on. The Broccoli's are getting older, but I think this is going to be a terrible decision because I think everything is about to be diluted.
I would agree with you. I am very, very upset about it. And, there was a little example of people sort of not getting it. So the thing that the Broccolis did was to maintain the Britishness of the series. That's the piece of the cultural tradition that has to be for us to enjoy it. And here comes Amazon, and I'm sorry to say, they're going to try to Americanize it or serialize it. They say they're not, or do some other crap like that, and it's just going to lose all the essence. So what I was about to say, I was watching CBS in the morning with Gail and a couple of people and Vlad, and the announcement, they were talking about this, what does it mean? And Vlad said, wow, and we still don't know who the new Bond would be. And Gail and the other co-anchors started naming all these people who were Americans, and he had to remind them and say, no, he's British. That's the whole point. It has to be somebody who is British, and they seem confused by that. But I don't think that Amazon's going to be confused. I think they're going to try it. And to the detriment, there is a reason that the British baking show is far superior than its American imitation. This is not to say there have not been some cultural fluidity between British shows that have been adapted in America. There's The Office. There's some other, big successes here. But none that had come with some ingrained Britishness that makes the whole daggone thing. So I think it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, I agree. I'm absolutely devastated. You talk about Amazon saying publicly they'll be responsible with the property. Jeff Bezos got on X and just tweeted out, who should be the next James Bond? Jeff Bezos is not a casting director, and sure, a lot of people, talk about that with their friends and colleagues, but you are the chairman of Amazon. This is now your property. You have weight. And it's kind of depressing to think that if enough votes get put into the thing, then that might have an influence. But I want you to think about this. James Bond, right? Eon Productions, which the Broccoli family has been in control of, they have produced 25 Bond movies from the 60s on, including Dr. No. By contrast, we have 35 Marvel movies since 2007, with I think 10 more in production. And there have been 5 Star Wars films since 2015, with another 8 in production, and neither of those are counting the multiple television series that come after it, which means to me, a Bond film is still an event. They are few and far between. It means something. You hang on to that for years with anticipation of what's the next adaptation going to be, the next story, the next casting, eventually the age out. Who's the next Bond? And, Netflix is trying out an espionage action thing with the Gray Man franchise that they got off the ground back in 2022. And you can already kind of see, this idea of a James Bond, copycat, right? Just kind of being content fodder, right? And James Bond could also fall into that same trap because remember, Amazon is a store. Their job is to sell you James Bond merch, books,
and I think absolutely the analogy here is Star Wars. And when Disney purchased that from Lucasfilms, then we got the television spin-offs and the animation spin-offs, and the film started moving forward. And you can totally see this happening with James Bond. Are we going to get Q's backstory, and then we'll get the young Bond, and then they'll spin off maybe some of the Bond girls, and they get their own story, and then suddenly you lose track. I have no idea where we are in the Star Wars universe anymore. I have no idea where we are in the Marvel universe anymore. One more just came out, and I thought, what does that even mean? I've totally lost all concept of that. Right. And I think the same exact thing is going to happen to Bond. When, to your point, James, they don't have to do it, because there is a reason that Amazon just paid a reported $1 billion for creative control, because it's making a lot of money. Right. If we also look at what Amazon did with Citadel, which I was so excited about, it was this espionage series that would go around the world. It was so flat, it was so wooden, it was so dumbed down. And then I later learned from one of my friends in Hollywood, it was because they sell this all across the world. So they can't have anything really singular or anything to identify it, to your point, Callie. Have this British figure and a very British story, because they need to be able to sell it around the world. And so they need to make it fairly universal, and I suspect that's going to happen here too.
Well, that's too bad, because the original, the British one, got sold around the world and people responded to it. So leave it alone. Okay, we'll see.
Yeah. Just to think too that Amazon bought MGM for $8.45 billion. So like, thinking about it as a business thing is so depressing, because it is a massive return, on investment. But I don't know. I'm not a chairman of anything. I'm not a CEO, but I can just imagine, isn't your life much easier when you buy the thing and then outsource that work, delegate it to somebody that does know what they're doing? Why make more work for yourself? Why sell what no one wants to buy? But I'm not an advisor, so I can't say much about that, Jeff.
Well, and I just want to know the stories behind the Broccoli's too, because there is another generation that could have taken over. So there's a little bit succession going on here. Because why didn't the next generation, why didn't the kids get to pick it up after Barbara Broccoli decided to walk away from it? Well, next, here comes the bot. Weddings are stressful enough, so why not outsource writing your vows to AI? We on the Culture Show noticed this week that this is something that has begun to spring up and be advertised, and that is, when you get too exasperated in all of your wedding planning, you can just turn to AI and have it write your wedding vows. So what did we do at the Culture Show this week? We turned to AI to have it write our wedding vows. So Max Chow-Gillette, one of our producers, you have to just enter in basically, looks like 3 prompts. What are our shared values? The blending of arts and culture, as well as public radio. That was our answer. What you most love about your partner? Our answer, have you showed up every single day, Monday through Friday, from 2 to 3 p.m.? In the style of, they ask, Shakespeare, we answered. So this is what AI came up with. I'll read this, and we'll have AI do the next one. O dearest love, my heart doth sing thy praise, for thou art the light that doth brighten my days. From Monday to Friday, thou art ever true, showing up from 2 to 3, as only thou can do. I thought we were going to have a little soundtrack there, Brian. So... Thank you, Brian. So our next prompt was our shared values, loving the Culture Show on GBH. What do you most love about your partner? Our mutual appreciation, of Jared Bowen, host of the Culture Show. I didn't enter this. And this is what AI had to write in the style of a pirate. Why don't we just have AI read this for us as well?
Ahoy, matey. As I stand here, staggering on this deck, I be thinking of the love we doth share. 'Tis a love that be stronger than any stormy sea, and more precious than all the treasure in the world. 'Tis not just your beauty that doth capture me heart. 'Tis your mutual appreciation for that handsome scallywag, Jared Bowen, host of the Culture Show on GBH. Oh, how we both do swoon o'er his charming wit. Now let us raise a tankard of rum to our love, and may it be as eternal and grand as the open sea. Forever and always, I be loving ye in the Culture Show on GBH. Yo ho ho.
Okay. So on second thought, I think AI is pretty brilliant. From my take, it's pretty brilliant.
Oh my God. Well, I read from the founder of this, one of them, that he really felt that they were just paralyzed because they really wanted it to be so perfect, that a little prompt helped. That what they have found is that few people use all that would be produced if you put a prompt in. But if you put in some of it, then people get inspired because it's so hard to start and it's so hard to finish because it takes so long. But this gives you a little boost. That's what he says. Most people are using it as a little boost and not as the real writer of the vows.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What we just heard was great. However, I will say there was that AI.
Really great.
It was really great. There was that AI giveaway with raising a tankard of rum, because I don't think that is physically possible to do. But that's a giveaway. But Cal, you were talking about the founder of this saying that people are paralyzed with fear and indecision and want it to be perfect, but that imperfection is what makes us us.
Yeah.
You think about music production and how you can make everything so perfect, down to the 128th note, if you will. And if you're doing this electronically, there are options that you can almost humanize, like introduce these tiny micro errors just to make the thing sound more natural. And I think some people might be thrown if they are on the recipient end of an absolutely perfect wedding vow and they know their partner that well. Because you're like, did you like that?
But to your point, it was not perfect.
Also true.
So, but actually, my take, other than the fact that I am going to propose to AI this weekend because of what it just said about me, is that I think that this is actually where the value of AI is, because people do. It is a day where you want it to be right, and I don't know if you want it to be perfect, but you certainly want it to be right. And if AI can help you, and you're not a writer, this is what we understand now about AI, that it can be the tools to at least move you along and get you there. Let's hope you're not going to do it unfiltered, and that you will go back and realize, no, I can't lift up an entire tankard of run, or wait a minute, I'm marrying Betty and not Martha, so let me correct that. But I actually looked at this and thought maybe it's a good thing. By the way, we added our little soundtrack to that, so AI doesn't come with its own orchestra with it.
I'll be looking very closely at the next weddings I attend.
Scrutinizing,
yes.
Well, that is our lightning signal, which means it's time for our lightning round. These are the headlines that caught our attention this week. Callie, what's yours? YouTube becoming just a powerhouse with podcasts. Now it's a powerhouse with a lot of content, but specifically with podcasts. 1 billion active viewers. Last year, viewers watched over 400 million hours of podcasts. And so the latest metrics say that this is the most popular platform for listening to podcasts in the U.S. And in addition to that, a lot of people have moved from, say, Spotify to YouTube deliberately because YouTube has a more, let's say, lucrative revenue sharing platform for the leaders of those podcasts. So, for example, Alex Cooper, who has a very popular podcast, Call Her Daddy, moved from Spotify to YouTube for that very reason. Has done very well. So that's interesting. YouTube used to be just little videos here and there, and now this is very, very serious business. Well, and in a moment where we were hearing that we were oversaturated and it was no longer a lucrative business, but it's still growing, which is a great signal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And once again, it has to be content that draws and continues to draw. So it's more than just throwing something up on the page, as we know, or on the air. We know that.
And this is maybe a good moment to remind people that the Culture Show podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts.
Those are some of those billion hours.
James, what's the headline that caught your attention?
Yeah, so last fall, a child was born, Ronan Walker Cobain Hawk, to Riley Hawk and Frances Bean Cobain. And so this kid has two very famous grandparents, if those names didn't give it away, in Kurt Cobain, the late Kurt Cobain of Nirvana, and the eternally down-to-earth, cool, ever-textable Tony Hawk. You can text him. His number is public, and he does his best to reply. And, this kid is in the news, not because of the kid, but because of something that Tony Hawk had posted a couple days ago, just expressing a sincere wish that Kurt Cobain was still here to know their shared grandchild. And, to me, that, again, kind of comes back to some of that nostalgia we were talking about with Flack and Trachtenberg and Hackman, that, there is this passage, of cultural kind of, icons generationally. We think about someone like, Drew Barrymore coming out of the Barrymore family, and so you think about what it must have been like decades ago, like, oh, this kid Drew is like you think about, and it's, kind of happening again, but for a completely kind of different demographic. So yeah, time just keeps going, and we're caught up in it.
And it's also shocking that Kurt
Yes.
Cobain's and Courtney Love's child is old enough to be having a child. This is mind-blowing.
That is right.
Well, my headline is that we learned a couple of years ago that there was a Barney movie in development. Of course, Barney is a long-running PBS show that was on from 1992 to 2018, but now 2018. And now I think we're looking at this a little bit differently because Barney is a Mattel property. Mattel did very well with Barbie. And so we also learned this week that Ayo Edebiri, who is the very acclaimed actor from Boston, Massachusetts, and Boston Latin, that she is going to be writing this movie and she's in talks to star in it. And so this is really fun to consider what she can bring in terms of her sensibility, her cleverness, her viewpoint, and where we once all kind of scoffed, I think, at what the Barbie movie could possibly be. Once we saw what Greta Gerwig did with that and the viewpoint she brought to that, I think it makes people pretty excited. We don't have a release date, but it is Mattel. It's also Daniel Kaluuya, who, of course, is involved with Get Out, and he's not going to be in the series, but also A24, the stellar production company, is involved with this. So this is something really exciting to look toward. So we will be following this. Maybe we'll have her on the Culture Show and its own podcast when this comes out.
The neon purple glow of Barney's A24 skin. Can't wait for that.
I can imagine this is going to be a little psychedelic.
Yeah.
We have a purple dinosaur running around in 2025, if it is 2025. All right, well, that's all for this edition of The Culture Show. You can tune in Monday as movie maven Joyce Kilhaywick joins me for a full Oscars recap. Also, retired Navy Admiral and NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis looks at this turbulent moment of global affairs. Got even more turbulent within the last few hours at the White House, as we saw with President Zelenskyy and President Trump. But he'll talk about global affairs by way of his best-selling fiction, which offers cautionary tales. Callie, what's coming up on Under the Radar this weekend?
Well, we're looking at some turbulent times with my contributors to my LGBTQ plus roundtable. And we're talking about, in the context of a recent poll, it says 1 in 10 Americans identify as LGBTQ, and the first out gay cabinet member in a Republican administration ever. There is more animus and more strife in the LGBTQ plus community because of these executive orders by President Trump, and the pushback and the exchange and what's true and what's not. We're taking a look at that.
Lots to learn there. And James, what can you tell us about your latest reporting, which people can find online?
Yeah, so the reporting continues of that story or idea of deconstructing the mythos of the battles of Lexington and Concord in April of 1776. Yes, got the year right.
You were trying to trick us.
I know what I'm doing. But more immediately, too, also hopping in for some Oscars deconstruction and recap. I cannot wait. I still have a couple more movies to go, and I will be bombing all 5 animated shorts or animated features in about 1 hour. So let's go. Movie marathon time.
All right. Well, thanks today to the BPL technical and logistics crew, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, Pat Lally, and Olivia Corcio. And thanks to the Lennox Newsfeed Cafe. I'm Jared Bowen. I'm Jared Bowen.
It's the AI.
Who are you?
Exactly. I didn't write this crap. Have a great weekend.
Ahoy, matey. I be loving ye and the Culture Show on GBH. Yo ho ho.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Spend your afternoon